There's an army of monsters in front of the guy. He tells the girl behind him to take the two people back to the castle. The girl addresses the boy as Takumi and says that he is only level 1. The guy smiles and says that everything is fine because he has this skill. His name is Takumi Saiki. He noticed that he was in an unfamiliar world. This year he turned 60. He quit his job and was now unemployed. In fact, he went on a trip around Europe to celebrate his retirement. He thought it was all a dream, but in reality it was not. The man on the throne says that his kingdom of Caledonia is about to be taken over by the Demon King, and in order to defeat him, they summoned them using a summoning ritual. The man says that in order to save the country in this world, he asks them to help him. Takumi thinks to himself that even if they told him to save him, he is already 60 years old, he will clearly need help. He notes the young people are interested. Since he lived alone, a prostitute and a child, and his parents had long since died, collaboration would not be easy. He wondered if he could help them. One of the men steps forward and introduces himself as Augusta, the court mage. He says that from now on they will be testing their compatibility. Takumi is surprised that the man is a mage. Augusta asks them to introduce themselves. One of the guys introduces himself as Eiki and says that he is Eiki Tanaka. The other guy introduces himself as Kenji Takayuchi. The girl is a little embarrassed, but says that she is Kurosaki Nene. The magician turns to the main character and asks him. He introduces himself as Takumi Saika and says that he is 60 years old and has been unemployed for 8 years. All the people started to react strangely. The hero did not understand their reaction. The man asks him to refrain from joking. The guy doesn't understand whether he said something strange. Augusta offers to test their abilities and asks them to open the status. The girl says, about the status. Takayuchi also says to open the status. Takumi says he understands to himself. He thinks about how he used to laugh when he read. The smartphone is like a magic box, but it's so similar to what's happening now. Eiki exclaims excitedly and says he's a level 42 professional hero. They say it's the level of a brave man, but in a different world. Takayuchi says he is a level 40 sage. The crowd exclaims again and says he is now a sage. This is also a very high level. Nine, a little embarrassed, says that she is a saint and that she is at level 52. The court magician asks Takumi about his status. He looks at his nameplate and his occupation. He sees in the column of his occupation that he is God. Takumi asks himself again if he is God. He thinks that neither the hero nor the sage are professionals, but the God is clearly different from them. He also asks them what they can do and how many skills they have. Takumi looks at his skill and says that there is only one. The man asks the level of this skill and says that if the level is huge, then it is not so bad. However, Takumi disappoints him and, after thinking for a bit, apologizes and says that he is level 1. Suddenly, a guard grabs him by the arms. Takumi asks the reason and then asks what it is. He is thrown down. The court magician says that only heroes can go up to the stage and the rest stand below. Eiki says with a smile on his face that it's very cute. After all, he was summoned to another world even though he had no abilities at all. The king says that everyone in this country should know. Today, 3 great heroes were sent to them. He calls it a divine gift given to defeat the Demon King and gain victory. The man also says that for the numerous weapons of the Demon King army approaching tomorrow with these heroes, he is confident that they will be able to overcome. Takumi thinks about what he said about the invasion tomorrow. He pats one of the men on the shoulder, apologizing. He asks him if it is true that the invasion is tomorrow. The man says that the Demon King's army is already approaching the royal city. He also says that he was saved because a hero came, and the Demon King's army is 10 times bigger than theirs. The guy is surprised that their army is 10 times bigger. To himself, the boy thinks about how he called them soldiers who would fight the Demon King. He thinks it's crazy that 3 rookies would fight an army that is many times larger than them and is older than them. It seems that Anshan will not have to fight. He can only go to the battlefield voluntarily. The hero asks the man to stop calling him An-chan. He turned 60 this year. The knight says that he seems even younger than his son. He also suddenly realizes that since he came into this world, he no longer has back pain or rheumatism in his knees. In the mirror, Takumi sees a young man and realizes that he has become younger. Another world, the Demon King. It was weird enough, but it got worse. Even so, these three seem to look their age. There is a feast in the castle. A man addresses the heroes and asks them to enjoy the dishes from the best Japanese chef. The guy with glasses doesn't know what this food is made of, but it looks very good. Takumi sits in front of a loaf of bread. He thinks to himself that this is the difference between a hero and an ordinary person. He thinks that now is not the time to be depressed and turns to people. On the contrary, he asks them to listen to him. He says that he realized that they were going to fight the Demon King's army, but according to the soldiers, the enemy army is 10 times larger than them. Takumi says that the war will be tomorrow, and they don't have a chance against such an army, because they don't even have real experience in battles. The guy asks the protagonist what he's talking about. Takeuchi says that it's okay that he's afraid of the upcoming fight, but they're a higher level, so he doesn't have to worry. Takumi thinks to himself that this is not at all reassuring. The girl says that she is a little scared, but if, by fighting, she can save the people of this world, then she does not mind. Takumi says that it's one thing if she's the same age as him, but if she's still a child, she can't talk about self-sacrifice. The girl is surprised that he called her a child. The man becomes agitated and asks if he was being rude, but says she is the same age as his granddaughter. Suddenly, the door opens, and someone asks for forgiveness. The court mage says they need to discuss tomorrow's battle. This is a course on how to use magic. Looks like it's time to test his magical powers. Nene thanks Takumi for worrying about her, and says that she has been worried ever since she came to this world, but now she is calm and ready to fight. The maid tells him that she has prepared a room for the priest. The guy's face is serious. The knight turns to Argust. The man in armor offers to get rid of the remaining strangers. The magician says that they should leave that useless guy in the castle until the battle is over. After all, everyone will be outraged if he suddenly disappears. Argusta smirks and says that after the battle he can throw him outside the city. After all, people with the first level cannot survive outside the city. Takumi in the room opens the status. He looks at his 2 high numbers. Takumi wonders to himself why his stats aren't showing up correctly. He assumes that he's so bad that the display is broken. Takumi assumes that he must be at the same level as the soldiers for it to work. Anyway, tomorrow he will check his status again. The guy falls asleep. However, suddenly, there is a loud noise outside the window. Takumi jumps up from the bed, exclaiming questioningly. Suddenly, his attention is drawn to a bright light. He realizes with horror that the battle has already begun. He runs down the street, thinking to himself that there is no one in the castle and everyone is hiding at home. Suddenly, he notices a rise on the defensive wall. He thinks he needs to get higher, because from there he can see the battlefield. He is surprised that he has run quite a lot, but is not even out of breath. Below, he sees fighting heroes. The guy in glasses tells them to burn in his flame, and the girl asks to provide protection to her. Takumi wonders why only these 3 are fighting while the soldiers are just watching. Takumi asks one of the men why they don't fight. In response, the knight asks him if he received orders that they should just leave everything to the 3 of them. The boy repeats his words and thinks to himself that in that case he should just tell the king to stop. He then wonders where he is. Looking around, he notices the king above the tower. He is going to climb the ladder to get there. He climbs the ladder. Halfway up, he hears the words of the magician and the king. One of them laughs and says that these 3 are incredible. The king says that at first he thought the summoning ritual was a waste of time. They may be outsiders, but they have enough magical power. And he taught the sage and the hero the magic of self-destruction. The mage says that he hopes that half of the Demon King's army will be killed, and then they will destroy the rest of the demons. He also says that he told the heroes that they would be able to revive them. Therefore, self-destruction magic is completely safe. The king laughs loudly and says that they are stupid, because rebirth magic does not exist. After their death, they will praise them as heroes. The hero asks them to wait. Takumi asks them that they are too foolish for those who seek help. The king realizes that it is the loser and asks what he is talking about. The man explains to him that they were called to this world and wanted to become heroes, and he did not force them to do anything. He does not understand what is wrong with sacrificing only 3 people from another world and saving his country. He understands that nothing will be solved by anger, especially in this situation. This is exactly what he has learned over half a century. He turns to the king and says that they are still young and promising, and he still has time to send an army. He kneels and begs him to spare them. The king takes the glass in his hands and puts it back. He refuses. The guy is surprised by this. The king says that a hero only becomes a hero when he dies. He asks if Takumi understands that they are supposed to be dead. He snaps his fingers and suggests adding the main character to the list of heroes. Suddenly, a lot of arrows hit the guy's body. A fierce struggle is underway. One of the heroes says that these demons are terribly stubborn. Ike silently wonders how many more demons he needs to take down. His sword snaps in half. He says that it looks like this is the end. However, the guy is not going to give up and shouts that he is a hero. He asks the second guy why he's taking so long and calls him Kenjin. The heroes tell him to throw the big rocks again. He says he's crazy because he doesn't want to waste that much magic. The sage asks to stop calling him Kenjin. Takayuchi thinks to himself that he has used too many powerful spells and now his magic is running low. He can still hold out with low and mid-grade magic, but he is not sure how long it will last. Minna yells at them to hold on and says that if they hold on a little longer, the castle will send them reinforcements. The girl says that she has enough magic to keep their HP up. She casts the Holy Light Barrier to protect herself from any harm. In this area of protection, all enemy magic is reduced to nothing, and theirs increases several times. All their magical power is gradually fading away. Eiki asks why everything is getting dark. The heroes are standing and suddenly fall. He remembers the words of that court magician who said that if they run out of mana, they will lose consciousness and soon die. He sighs heavily and thinks to himself that the time has come. He shouts his secret technique, the ultimate magic of self-destruction that will wipe them all into dust. The guy with a smile on his face tells her that everything is fine and they are from another world, so even if they die, they will still be resurrected. Mene says that he is right, of course, but they ask why the rules are different only for them. The guy explains to her that they are just the chosen ones. He says that everyone online knows him as the legendary Tanji. The guy says that he would not have achieved this if he had backed down every time. He steps forward, addresses the monsters as weaklings before him, and commands them to taste bitterness, regret for standing in his way. He activates the suicide bomber. However, someone shouts at him to stop and removes him. The boy is shocked. The saint screams Konami's name. Takumi is glad that their heads are still there. Takumi smiles and says that he is glad, despite everything, that they are alive. The girl screams that there are monsters everywhere, and he can't be here. She asks why he is here. It's quite a funny story. Some time ago. Takumi wakes up. He wonders because he clearly remembers being hit by arrows and falling from such a height. However, he realizes that as much as he wants to solve this mystery, he needs to save these children before they use self-destruct magic. He runs forward, but reminds himself that he should not forget to look around. Suddenly, he notices a monster in front of him. Only now does he remember that he was still a level 1 rookie, and assumes that his slow thinking is due to his age. He picks up a stone not far from him and throws it. It may be useless, but he knows that even a pebble can stir up a whole lake. Suddenly, the stone hits the target and kills the monster. Takumi doesn't understand anything. He looks at the other stone and is still surprised. He also notes that there are still a lot of monsters left here and thinks that he needs to continue. Takumi throws stones in different directions. Takumi thinks to himself that it's good that they can be defeated with rocks, but that something like a gun would be much better. Suddenly, a gun appears in his hand. He exclaims in surprise. The monsters attack him, but he repels their attack with his pistol. In surprise, he notices that the gun is gone. He realizes that he just needs to think about something, and it immediately appears. The same voice sounds in his head again, telling him what is happening, making a gun. Takumi screams that it worked, and all he needs to do is think of something, and it will appear. He realizes that if something is created by just one thought, then he wants to create the weapon he saw. Takumi hears the voice in his head again, and a weapon appears in his hands. The guy smiles and shouts that it really worked. He notices the monsters standing nearby. It clicks, and there is an explosion. This is much better than just throwing stones. He runs forward and notices 2 figures ahead. He realizes that they are the 3 children. He also realizes that if this is his special move, then it is probably a suicide bombing technique. He realizes he has to stop him. Takumi hits the target and the teenager falls. The girl next to him is surprised. Suddenly, Takumi exclaims, realizing that it was a monster-killing stone. Takumi rushes forward, happy that Takayuchi is still alive. The girl is surprised that Takumi is here. Takumi says that he is glad that they are okay. He turns to the girl and says it's time to retreat. Nene says they can't run away now because the king and the others are in the castle and they are counting on them. He doesn't understand what she's talking about. Her life is in danger. Nini replied that he was right, but unlike them, the people of this world would not be able to resurrect. Takumi grabs the girl by the shoulders and tells her that they were all deceived and everything is not at all as it seems. The boy says that the king lied to them and death here is the same end as everywhere else. Takumi explains to her that for him they are just disposable pawns, and also that he sees them from the castle walls and knows that they are already at the limit, but the gates are still closed. Takumi apologizes to Nene and says that he shouldn't have yelled at her, but she shouldn't trust the king. Nene smiles at him and thanks him. She says that it actually seemed a little strange to her. The girl smiles resolutely, and they ask him what they will do. Takumi suggests retreating to the castle and grouping up with the army, as this is the only route where there are no enemies. He also notes that even if that were the case, each of them would have to carry one person. The girl explains to him that he can leave Takayuchi and Aiki to her, as the saint is several times stronger than an ordinary person. Takumi says that he will buy her some time while she returns. The girl is against it and says that he can't, because he only has his first. Takumi says that everything will be fine with him. He reaches out, conjures a grenade launcher, and tells her with a smile on his face that he's just using his skill. The girl is amazed and asks him how he did it. The guy explains to her that he himself doesn't quite understand how it actually works. Nene says that it's still amazing and very similar to a summoning skill. He thinks to himself that he called it a skill to make it clearer. Takumi says that he will cover their retreat anyway and asks Nene to take care of the sage and the hero. The girl takes the two guys and runs away. Takumi is surprised by her skills. He notices the monsters in front of him and says it's time to get rid of the trash. Takumi clicks. An explosion occurs. Takumi thinks that this will be enough, and it's time for him to return to the castle. He runs towards the gate, but notices Nene at the gate itself. Takumi asks the girl what's going on. She explains to him with a worried look that they cannot get inside because they do not want to open the gate. The guy thinks to himself that even after they've seen everything, they don't want to accept what's happening right before their eyes. The guy asks those up there what they're doing. He yells at them to open that gate right now. Suddenly, someone from above asks him why he is not dead yet. The king shouts that their task is to destroy the Demon King's army, so they must go back. The arrows fall near them. The girl suggests that he return for now. She takes two guys. Takumi sees a crowd of monsters in front of him and, taking aim, realizes that for now, they just need to fight the demons. Suddenly, the girl asks him to wait, but he already manages to shoot. Nene says that the barrel is from behind. Takumi turns around and realizes that the projectile has hit the gate. The gate and tower collapsed. The king says that this loser wanted to kill him, and the army orders to protect the king. The army is rushing forward. Nene is happy that they sent an army. Takumi turns to the girl and asks her to take the hero and the sages to safety. He will fight the king's army. She says that she also wants to help. He replies that she'll be much more useful if she stays away. Takumi is confident that they will be fine without him. He turns around and says, with a smile on his face, that he is just a loser who was called here by mistake. He ran towards the demon army. He really doesn't understand why he was summoned to this world. He planned to give way and entrust the future to the young. The guy smiles and stands in front of the crowd of demons. He thinks to himself that fighting so many monsters with just a grenade launcher is a bad idea. In high school, he liked one anime. It was about a small flotilla of spaceships that set out to liberate the Earth from invaders. Suddenly, a voice in the boy's head says that he is pumping highly concentrated energy into the main channel. Takumi notes that this cabin looks very familiar. A voice in his head says the gun is loaded to 120. Takumi hesitantly gives the order to fire. The spaceship shoots at the monsters. All the people are surprised. In place of the monsters, there is only a funnel. Without the Demon King's army, the mountain range looks great. But the good thing is that half the country wasn't accidentally blown up. The knights are surprised. One of them asks what it was. The second man replies that he does not know and suggests that he not find out. Takumi says to himself that sometimes, when you run into problems, the best solution is to just run away. It's been half a month since the battle with the Demon King's army. He is in Pananto village, and everything would have been fine if they hadn't started looking for him for an attempt on the king's life. After he managed to escape pursuit, he helped dig a well. In this village, they now help with the housework. This ability, Create Essence, is very useful for him as a general worker. Suddenly, he notices a crowd of people ahead. They are animatedly discussing something. In the middle of the crowd, he sees 3 people. The people continue to chat. Suddenly, one of the men addresses Takumi. Takumi asks him if he is an adventurer. The guy answers yes and introduces himself as Carlet. He says that he is the leader of the Blue Wolf main group. The guy apologizes to him for suddenly forcing him to show them the way. Despite their intimidating appearance, Takumi understands that the guys have manners. Carlet says that it seems that few people know about this. He also says that the country asks for demons to be exterminated, and they, the adventurers, do their job. The adventurer introduces herself as Rain and says that she is a thief and asks not to offend her. The girl asks why Takumi was so scared. Takumi thinks to himself that then the sage and the heroes are no different. He remembers old friends. Unexpectedly, Takumi clings to the girl's words and realizes that they were here before. After all, the accumulation of evil spirits needs to be dispersed regularly. The man takes off his hood, and it turns out to be a beautiful girl. She says that he is not as simple as he seems. Carlet introduces the girl as Faralina and says that she is an elf and communicates with spirits. The girl blushes and tells the guy not to stare at her. She covers her ears with her cloak and says that is why she does not like people. The guy blushes, vehemently denies everything, and says that she is very beautiful, that's why he was staring. The girl exhaled and took off her hood. The guy wants to get back to the conversation. He says that initially they carried out similar requests from the same group, but this time the circumstances forced them to do so. Carlet says he heard about the Demon King's army attacking the royal capital. The guy says that, according to His Majesty's announcement, he personally led the army on the front lines. The adventurer says that the country has always been a mess, and there are too many people in the Adventurers Guild, so they were kicked out. The boy remembers that he wanted to ask one more thing. Takumi asks why they called themselves Blue Wolf Main. Carlet blushes and says that it would sound cool, so he gave the team a name. Suddenly, he shouts that it sounds really cool. The heroes continue on. Rain is unhappy with this road and asks if there was an easier way. The elf also agrees with her and says that even they, adventurers, don't often take such routes. Carlet turns to Takumi and asks if he knows his way around here. Takumi replies negatively and says that he only knows the way, since he is not from here either. The elf is surprised and thinks to herself that he got used to it quite quickly. The guy says that the road is not easy, so it seems that no one except hunters goes along it. The guy behind him approaches him and asks how he hunts, then suggests that he must use a bow. Takumi says that Carlet has guessed wrong, and he is simply throwing stones. Rain, surprised, asks him again, and Faralina says that it is not easy with a bow, and he hunts with stones. Takumi says that at first it didn't work out at all. Takumi tells the boys that once you get used to it, everything is surprisingly simple. They had almost reached the cave. Suddenly, Rain asks him if he wants to become an adventurer. She says that it is hard to hunt wild birds with pebbles and says that he is also at the appropriate level. The guy says he's level 1. Carlet asks him again. The guy asks what the main character's parameters are. The hero says that there were a lot of 9s. Carlet says that since it's level 1, it's no surprise that he couldn't reach double digits. The boy turns to Takumi and, bowing, asks him to forgive him. Carlet says that this is where the enemy's territory begins, and with his first level, he can't go to the village alone. The heroes move on. They go down the rope. Takumi notes that it is very deep here. Carlet says that the road ahead is flat and they can go on foot. The boy turns to Faralina and asks her for a favor. The sphere in her hands begins to glow. Rain explains that this is the spiritual magic of their Faralina. Suddenly, a voice in his head says that an LED flashlight is being created. Suddenly, a flashlight appears in his hand. Adventurers are surprised. Takumi apologizes to the guys and says that he got it without thinking. Takumi says that it's kind of his ability. The elf says she wonders how low her authority will fall if she remains standing there, releasing light. She explains to him that in spiritual magic, you can't use multiple spells at once, so he helped her out. She thanks Takumi. Carlet says that's great, and then Takuma will be responsible for the light. He suggests that they move on. The heroes continue walking, but suddenly notice something. Carlet is alarmed and loudly shouts at Takumi to step back. Takumi is confused. The adventurer says that it is weak. Bats and warn everyone not to let themselves be bitten because they have paralytic poison. Faralina uses magic. The second girl takes out daggers from behind her back and begins to cut the mice. Takumi notes that the enemy is not strong, but the mice have the advantage in numbers. He assumes that the three of them cannot handle it. Takumi notices a rock nearby. He tosses it in his hands and thinks. He throws rocks. He says that he will support the guys without interfering, and kills the monsters from an ambush. After the fight, the guy says they did it faster than he thought, and the elf says she thought there were more of them. Carlet says that's great and suggests they make a recording. He looks at the card and says that he killed 33 mice. Takumi notices this and asks what they have. The other guy explains that they are note cards. This card is enchanted so that by simply touching it, a party member can read and write information about slain monsters. Takumi says that it is a useful thing and asks if it can be used to find out who, how many, and what kind of monsters were killed. Carlet answers positively and says that monsters have their own threat rank, and the higher the rank of the monster he defeats, the higher the reward he will receive. T also says that their rank is also increasing. The girl says that Faralina has 8 and she has 25, and that they have new record holders. She throws the display to Takuma. Takumi grabs the display. The other guy tells her to stop fooling around, since Takumi didn't fight, so there can't be a recording. Takumi laughs, but their attention is drawn to the display. There are blurry records, and he can't understand the rank of his threat and the rank of the group. The adventurers snatch the display from his hands. He says that they must hurry, because it seems that the depth gauges are hiding many more monsters. Takumi is surprised to himself that he screwed up again. Carlet shouts to the girls that the enemy is very close. Faralina says that she will distract them with magic, and the rest is up to her friend. Rain agrees with her and tells her to think carefully. The girl conjures an airwave. Rain jumps up and grabs the daggers from behind his back. They were killing bats. Takumi admires their coordinated actions. He thinks to himself that in order not to be a dead weight, he too is secretly making his contribution by throwing stones. Apparently, the so-called weeding is going well. The elf looks at the display. Takumi thinks that it broke in his hands, but apparently the problem is not with the card. They look at the display and see that it is the number 11. He says it's interesting because this time they were small bats, not weak ones. The girl says that's exactly what she thought because these sick ones fight back, and she guesses that there was even one medium one. Carlet is very confused and says that it is horrible. And apparently, the deeper they go into the cave, the stronger the adversary becomes. Rain distracts them and asks them to see what she found. They see a tunnel. The guy is surprised that the tunnel is in such a place and assumes that it is quite deep. The girl assumes that it has recently collapsed and seems to connect to another cave. She also notices that there is no moss growing on this rock. Carlet turns to Faralina, who says she feels a strong energy from there and asks them to wait, because she must ask the spirits. The girl concentrates, putting 2 fingers to her forehead. The guy asks what they are saying, and she replies in confusion that their words are incomprehensible. Rain asks what exactly is incomprehensible. The girl says that she understands that there is a lot of energy building up in the cave, but she finds it strange that there are undoubtedly monsters of the class I am below the big bats down there. Vika says that if there was a demonization process, the spirits would be noisier. Carlet says that he didn't understand anything. Takumi asks Rain what demonization means. Rain explains that the large bats are a dangerous C rank, and even one such bat is beyond their power. She also says that when he observes conditions in which these creatures begin to rage more than usual, and their number is like salmon eggs, then one can safely call this process demonization. The guy repeats her words about the eggs to himself and thinks that he doesn't really understand what kind of wildness is going on there, but he assumes that the place is really creepy. The guy says that, in any case, they are no longer able to do this, and that it is better to return to the city as soon as possible and report to the guild so that they can send out a punitive detachment. The elf says that the guild will not be able to organize a punitive detachment based on the information they currently have. Carlet silently considers the situation. Rain seriously says that, having exceeded the capacity of the cave, the monsters may fall out. Takumi questions her anxiously and asks her to wait. He says that if this happens, the nearest village will be Penanto. The girl says that she will probably be the first to be attacked. Takumi is horrified. The elf suggests at least scouting the situation. The guy says that even here there are medium bats, and with their levels it is too dangerous to move on. Takumi seriously thinks about it. Rain notices this. The girl says that one way or another they can only retreat. She suggests that they keep an eye on Takumi and the guys move on. After all, that way they can increase the pace. The adventurer asks her not to take her eyes off him, and Faralina tells her to light it. The girl says that she has lit it. Carlette turns to the protagonist, gritting her teeth. He asks him to forgive them for their weakness, and says that if they were stronger, they would probably be able to handle at least the reconnaissance. Takumi turns to him worriedly. The adventurer says that at least upon his return, he will report this to headquarters, so that they can send the punitive detachment as quickly as possible. The heroes head towards the exit. Takumi thinks to himself that, based on what they say, deep within this hole there are conditions suitable for the so-called demonization. He realizes it's only a matter of time before the demons break out. He turns around and is surprised to see that Rain is missing. The guy assumes that he's gotten way ahead. Takumi turns and sneaks back, thinking to himself that this is for the best. He doesn't think he can do anything on his own. However, he thinks that if he can at least find out the size of the cave, then perhaps he will be able to speed up the process of sending a punitive detachment. He stands in front of the cave. He cracks his fists and thinks about where to start, talking about it out loud. Suddenly, Rain appears behind him and puts a hand on his shoulder. Ask him if they're going. Takumi is very surprised. He turns to the girl and asks why she is here. Rain says that it was written on his face that he would return here alone and check everything. She suggests that he does this for the village that feeds him. The girl says that he is indeed a good man, and that is what she likes about him. Takumi asks her again, and pretends that since she is here, she is the same. The girl laughs. She says that she just couldn't stop a level 1 person who was about to do something stupid. Rain says that besides, their captain is a decent man, but too stubborn, and he probably wanted to check everything himself. And that means the report to the guild is a trust in their captain, and we will take on the risky expedition ourselves. Takumi thinks about the girl and asks if she is worried about her comrades. She says that she is not as nice as him, and if things get tough, she will run ahead of him. Takumi says that he understands her, and hearing that actually makes him feel better. The girl says it's nice. The guy suggests moving on. The guy and the girl move forward. Suddenly, Takumi notices that it has become lighter. The girl says that this noise is from spirits that react to strong energy. That's what Faralina told her. Suddenly, they notice monsters ahead. The entire cave is strewn with winged monsters. Takumi realizes that this is an underground lake. Rain begins to understand everything. The guy turns to the girl, not understanding what she is talking about. Tak says that this is a rare case where the water mixed with the energy around it, and that is why the spiritual magic did not work. Rain also says that this lake will become a huge magical pool. Takumi asks her again. She says that, as a rule, the energy is concentrated in one area, and the process of demonization begins much faster. The groundwater stirred it up, and it became a magical pool of unimaginable size. He asks her that, in other words, this thing is more dangerous than the usual demonization. The girl answers positively and says that if it grows to such a size, demonization will begin, it will be bad. She laughs nervously and says that the thought of it makes her panties wet. Takumi thinks to himself that what they've found out, the scale of the problem, is good, but it's even worse than expected. The girl says it's time to go back. She doesn't know if this information will be enough for the guild or not. After all, it could be a state-level problem. As they walk away, Rain suddenly notices something and turns around. She yells at Takumi to lie down and pushes him forward. Takumi sees a large monster. The girl says that it is a big bat and that she was stupid to go right under the flock. The Takumi asks her if she got hurt. She replies that it's just a scratch and says that she's stuck here, so he has to go forward without her. Takumi says that he can't do that. He looks forward determinedly and clenches his hands. The girl asks him what he is doing. Takumi thinks that if he can create a powerful weapon, he might be able to defeat them. However, there is a chance that the cave will collapse. He thinks about how it worked in the capital against the Demon King's army. Takumi throws a rock at the monster. The bat is destroyed. The guy says it turned out well and is happy. The girl is shocked and asks him how he did it. Takumi says that everything happened very quickly, and it was just luck. The girl asks him again and says that he just killed them with a stone. The heroes see that the monsters are starting to surround them. The girl says that the whole cave now knows about their presence. They're about to break out. Takumi asks her again. The girl thinks that in such a situation, demonization will also begin. Carlet and Faralina run towards the village. The boy suggests that they race. The girl agrees. Suddenly, they hear a rumble. The girl asks what that sound was, and the boy notes that it came from the cave. The cave collapses. Takumi says that everything is bad and suggests that the girl get out of here. However, she is unconscious. He calls her name, but notices a light above. He assumes that it is a light from outside, and also that evil is crawling out. He says that they can't be allowed to escape, otherwise the village is finished. He thinks to himself that he can use the creation of essence and create something. He ponders over what he should create. He realizes that he can't think of anything, and the first thing he needs to do is to do something about the hole. However, he pulls himself up short and says that he needs something to destroy this devil's nest. He needs something big and heavy. In the chapter, a voice is heard about creating something. The girl screams her friend's name, but Carlet stops her and says that they will be covered too. Suddenly, they are covered by the shadow of something big. The girl asks what it is. They see a huge monster in front of them. It is said and is pushing the soil under itself. The Takumi are surprised that it is Godzilla. Come to think of it, before he came to this world, he saw this thing on TV, crushing everything in its path, a huge lizard. Such an animal could deal with demons or caves. He doesn't believe that he created it, but he notes that it can't be said that the result is not positive. Takumi holds Rain in his arms. Now all they have to do is get down from here. They are on the monster's head. Adventurers Guild of Raldant. Someone shouts loudly, questioningly. Carlet asks the woman at the reception desk how the guild could not confirm the discovery to the cave blockade. The elf says that if they had been credited for this task, they would have probably increased their rank. The girl asks what she can do. There is no place left of the cave, and all that the reconnaissance squad could record was a huge depression. The guy says that he already spoke about an unknown monster of unimaginable size that stepped on the cave and destroyed everything. The girl asks them to accept it. After all, even if it is true, the guild will not believe in such a thing. The guy droops in resignation. The girl says that the cave is completely destroyed, and there is not a scratch on them. Faralina says that she and the chief were outside. Rain says that something hit her in the cave and she lost consciousness, but she was saved by a boy from the village who showed them the way. The elf says that they then healed her with magic. The girl asks admiringly if it is true that she was saved by a boy from the village. She says that saving a fainted girl, risking her life, is a wonderful story. She asks her to tell about him and asks if he is handsome and if he is busy. The guy says he recently told them he wasn't from around here at all. The elf says that he seemed strange in general. He looks young but has a whiff of old man's calm, like the elders of her village, and there is a sense of stupidity and some kind of lethargy in him. In the end, she says that he is good. The girl is disappointed, thinking that from the stories he looks like a pensioner. Rain suddenly sighs. The girl asks her what happened and why. She sighs. The girl says she remembers Takumi, a guild worker. They ask if he is the same one. Faralina answers positively. She makes the assumption that Rain has fallen in love with him. The girl is angry and asks her to stop getting excited at the drop of a hat. After all, she is trying to think about serious things. The elf asks what she's thinking about. The girl shows the stone and says that's exactly what she's thinking about. The guy wonders if it's a stone. Faralina asks what's wrong with it. The girl says that if she tells them that when the big bat attacked them, Takumi threw that rock and blew them away, they won't believe it. Rain says that she saw it with her own eyes. Carlet claims that this can't be true. Faralina suggests that it could have been a dream while she was unconscious, or a hallucination. The girl says that she didn't expect anything else from her friends. The guild worker says she has no idea what they are talking about, but they already know the guild's decision, and they need to complete the task first. She reminds the name that they still haven't entered the data. Carlet twitches and shouts that he completely forgot about it. The girl says that the F-rank cleanup is considered complete. She offers to look at the cards and says that she will first read the data from them. The guild worker announces to them that all the boys' ranks have remained unchanged. Carlet is sad because they punished a lot of bad guys this time, and he thought the rank would go up. The girl says that next they have a group card and announces the name of the group. She takes the data and notices that it is very strange because usually the group card is processed faster than the others. She takes it out and asks what is written on it. Suddenly, the girl falls silent and then exclaims loudly. The guy asks something and the girl asks what happened. The guild worker says that the group's rank is Essus and that it says that they exterminated 78,000 monsters. She is very surprised and asks if this is a joke. The boy asks the group's rank again, surprised. Faralina asks her to wait and points out that the maximum group rank is S. The girl asks if they have surpassed S rank, does that mean the Blue Wolf main is the best in the world? The guy asks how this could happen and suggests that the card is faulty. The girl says that it simply can't be. The elf suggests that they were all bewitched. Rain says that it might be Takumi. Carlet asks her why she remembered him and what he has to do with it anyway. Faralina exclaims and says that if you think about it, the second girl agrees and urges them to remember. He was the one who touched the map before Kessely took it. He was the last one to touch it. The guy remembers that he is only level 1 and his stats are all 9s. The girl says that he hasn't seen it and suggests that he can actually destroy large bats with rocks. The guild girl asks them to listen to her and says that it is possible. Takumi is one of the 3 heroes who defended the capital from the invasion of the Demon King's army. The heroes ask her again. She says that they said that he recently came to the village of Pananto. Legend has it that there are 3 heroes. The first saint is sent to the main temple of the church. The second sage is left in the castle, and the remaining heroes go on a journey. Elphias says that it turns out that Takumi is a hero. She would never have thought of that. The guild worker says that it would explain everything. After all, the timing matches up. He turns to the boys and says that he understands how exhausting a 4-day journey is, but he wants to offer to go there again because then they can ask him about it. The girl supports him and says that she does not agree to sit in ignorance, being number 1 in the world. Her friend is also interested in this. The guild worker tells them to leave the rest to her. After all, if there is any message from headquarters about us, this will sort it out. The guy thanks her and says that it is time for them to move. The heroes raise their hands and shout that it is time for them to move forward for the truth. Rain thinks to herself that Takumi will tell her who he really is. Someone asks to wait because the map was forgotten. The guy remembers this. The girl puts a piece of paper in front of him and says that this is his work for today. He thanks her and says that the guilds here are quite lively today. The guild worker laughs and agrees with him, as many groups have returned from missions today. The girl tells the protagonist that his sister, Kessely, works at a nearby establishment and calls her lively. Takumi says he'll know. He's been in Relente for 3 days now. Kessie-san, being the owner of an employment agency, helped him a lot. The girl says that his work is highly appreciated. She also notes that everyone praises him for being fast and incredibly polite, and that when the client is happy, the boss is happy. She says that she is very grateful to him. Takumi was convinced to use a pseudonym here to avoid unnecessary problems, since he is a wanted criminal. Like in the village, his essence creation skill was extremely useful. He recalls the words that art saves the soul. Takumi also recalls why he came to Relente. He recalls his first experience of parachuting from a gorilla's head and then returning to the village, missing members of the Blue Wolf's mane. Takumi asks the village elder about the youth returning. He says he has just been contacted and told that the young soldiers called up to defend the capital are being sent home. Takumi is thoughtful, because among the capital's troops there may be those who recognize him. Although it was a misunderstanding, there was a price on his head, and if any discord happened because of this, the village could be in trouble. Although he didn't want to leave, it was better for him to stay away from the village. He recalls that in his old age he wanted to whisper about leaving and run away quietly, but they threw him a banquet, and the whole village saw him off. And the next day, in order to leave the village as quickly as possible, he conjured up a bicycle for himself. Takumi rides forward. He looks at the sun and thinks that this wonderful view is beautiful. In this world, deprived of the benefits of civilization, one can feel nature in its original form. Mountains and forests, rivers and trees, untouched by human hands, are truly beautiful. True evil spirits live in the most deserted places. Takumi thinks to himself that the bike is so comfortable, as if the pedals themselves are turning. He also doesn't understand why the scenery seems to become very distant. From the outside, Takumi is riding at a very high speed. He recalls that he finally reached the Blue Wolf main base in 1 hour. There is an employment agency in this city, something like their hello job. He heard that anyone could find work there, so he went there. Upon arrival, he decided to look into the Adventurers Guild, but he was told that the guys from Maine had not yet returned from their mission. Once he gets the job, he won't be back in town for a few days or weeks. Takumi thinks to himself that he should be back by then. 10 days after arriving in the city. It's noisy outside. Many people are chatting. Takumi thinks to himself that there are many more people. He makes the assumption that people have gathered for some kind of celebration, and everyone, like Carlet, is dressed in some kind of brutal way. Suddenly, he is called out. It turns out to be the man from the castle. He laughs and says that he noticed a familiar face. The man calls him a pseudo-hero. The guy gets scared and remembers that it is the soldier from the castle. Takumi realizes that this is the first person who has recognized him, and it's bad because he might figure him out. The man laughs and says that he was just taken off the wanted list, and he immediately jumped out, and they call him the Rogue. Takumi doesn't understand what he's talking about and asks again. The knight asks if this is the first time he's heard about it. He says that his friend Heroi asked His Majesty to clear Takumi of suspicion of the assassination attempt on the king. Takumi is surprised and does not believe this, asking if it is true. The man says he went straight to roll, and he seemed pretty damn persistent, and that inflated bubble was shaking like a rat. Takumi asks who it was. However, the man replies that he does not know, and says that 2 of the 3 heroes left the castle, and only the sage remained in the capital. The knight asks him to forget about it, and assumes that he is here to join the adventurers. Takumi asks him again. The man agrees and smiles. He says that there is a rumor going around that you can strike it rich if you join the Rollant Guild. After all, there is a SS-ranked group called Blue Dragon Shield in it. The man says that the mere thought that they belong to the same organization makes his self-esteem grow. And he assumes that he is not the only one who thinks so. After all, adventurers who heard the rumors began to gather. Takumi laughs nervously. Now he understands why so many people look wild. He blurts out the names of these groups and makes the assumption that adventurers like to act arrogantly. One of the men is surprised that it's closed again today. Another says that the girl behind the counter said that they don't have any bands called Blue Dragon Shield and pushed him out the door. The knight says that if the guild's headquarters are closed, there's nothing they can do. When such a rabble comes, anyone would refuse. And today, there are even more of them. The man tells him to try harder and say thank you to his hero friend. Takumi clenches his fist. He understands that in order to remove him from the wanted list, he personally addressed the king, and he must meet him and thank him properly. And for this, he must return to the capital and scout out the situation. The guy tugs at the door handle, but it doesn't budge. He thinks to himself that he should have gone to see Cassie first and thanked her for her help. He realizes that the door is locked and the guild is on break. Then he realizes that with all the commotion outside the door, it's not surprising. He remembers the girl's words about how if the door is locked, he can come in through the back door. The worker said that they work with the neighboring shop, I inform you, and in fact, of course, you can't do that. But she will make an exception for him. He thinks to himself that since he was allowed, he can take advantage of it. Takumi opens the door. Suddenly, a girl appears behind him. She cracks her fingers and says that someone must have gotten very bold since they are ready to come in from the back. He asks her to spare him because she misunderstood, and he has his own reason. The girl screams that it is useless to argue and is already trying to attack him. However, Cassie suddenly comes in and asks what's going on. I greet Takumi with unexpected tenderness. Kasali asks if this is her client. The girl also says that she was sure that this was one of those foolish adventurers. After some time, Cassie is disappointed and asks how he can leave so quickly. Takumi answers positively and says that he is going to visit an acquaintance in the capital. The girl still does not believe it and asks if it is true. Takumi turns to Kesali and asks her to pass on something. The girl asks him again and gets a positive answer. The guy says that he wants to pass on something to the guys from the Blue Wolf Maine. The girl is surprised. He asks her to convey his gratitude for their support and that he will pray for their health and well-being. She thinks to herself that this is very formal. Takumi says goodbye to them and wishes them all the best. Cassie cries and says that this is an unbearable loss because she cannot believe that she will never see him again. Her sister doesn't understand her because she's married and shouldn't covet other men. The girl says that Takumi is special. Even though he's a hammer, he's full of calm and warmth. and his old man's atmosphere healed her. Cassie tells her to think better of herself. After all, she still can't get married. The girl screams that she can and does not go out, not because she can't, but because there is no suitable man whom she could marry. The girl drinks from the glass and says that it was her sister who started chatting about some blue dragon shield. The girl is surprised at how quickly the rumor spread, and even the name got mixed up. The girl says that she is guilty because she got the name wrong, but in her defense, she says that she told everyone not to tell anyone and makes the assumption that those who failed to keep the secret are to blame. The girl is surprised by her sister, but then says that she was hasty with this Takumi and that he named their group correctly. Cassie asks her sister what the group is doing now. She replies that they went to Panento village to see this Takumi who started all this mess. She says that it is still strange when guys with Ed rank become SS of the rank group and will receive high-level tasks, and they can also become targets for thugs. The girl asks her again about the village and mentions that Takumi came from there. Kesali repeats about the village and Takumi. Suddenly, it dawns on her that he is one and the same person. The girl blushes and asks her to wait, and also begins to repeat their words about him being young but acting like an old man. The girl realizes that the descriptions match exactly. She asks her sister what to do, because it turns out that she said goodbye to the person who is now the main topic of discussion in the guild. I'm talking all sorts of nonsense. The girl giggles and says that her Takumi is a striking figure. Also, Cassie says that sitting still won't change anything and pours another bottle. For change. Her sister says she doesn't care anymore and urges her sister to prepare a basin, but today she wants to get drunk. Takumi hasn't seen Kenjin in a while and wants to see him soon, and the other heroes too. He wonders what they've been doing all this time. He rides forward, people look at him. Takumi says his name is Takumi Saki. About a month ago, he was summoned to this world with 3 other heroes to protect the kingdom from the Demon King. In the battle with the Demon King, the 3 enjoyed it as if it was a game. But in reality, the king wanted to defeat the Demon King's army by allowing the 3 heroes to use self-destruction magic. They didn't even know that they would be resurrected. However, Takumi learned about this before the battle and therefore objected to the king, after which he was accused of attempting to assassinate the king. Because he fought in his own way, Takumi was somehow able to repel the Demon King's attack and was eventually driven out of the capital and declared a wanted man. He fled the capital and stayed in Pennant Village for a while. After that, he decided to go to Laurent City, the base of the Blue Wolf main adventurers group he met in the village. In this city, he learned that he was no longer wanted, and it seems that one of the 3 heroes personally approached the king with a request to lift the search. He finally learned what kindness to strangers from another world was and understood why they should meet in person. Because of this, he leaves the city and goes to the capital. There are 3 signs in front of the main character. He thinks to himself that he seems to be lost. He names, this is about the fact that in the city they showed him the way to the capital, but he completely forgot that this is another world. He now realizes that setting off alone on a bicycle without any idea of the place was foolhardy. He should have at least found out the name of the place. He is glad that, fortunately, it at least looks like a highway, and someday someone will pass here. Suddenly, he sees a carriage in the distance. The guy waves his hand and asks them, apologizing, asks them to stop. Suddenly, someone tells him to be quiet and not to make noise, and then puts a sword on his shoulder. Turning around, he sees thieves. The carriage is moving at high speed. A man inside apologizes to the protagonist for scaring him. He says that these are the escorts that he hired, and although they look rather rough, they are actually A-rank adventurers. The man assumes that he was wary because they were alone in such a dangerous place. Takumi asks him again and does not understand what he is talking about. The man explains that along that road there are half a dozen wandering monsters or bandits. Takumi is frightened. The man turns to him and says he is rummaging around because he has business in the northern capital of Karendore. He introduces himself as Ramild of Alpentos. Takumi is asked if he was a merchant and says that, to be honest, he wouldn't say that. He says that he doesn't have enough money to thank him. The man laughs and tells him not to worry because everything has already been paid for. Takumi asks what he said. Ramild says that his status is that of a rich merchant and he has prophetic skills. With this skill and Takumi, there are things that will benefit him. Takumi asks if this is true and says that he doesn't have a penny. The man explains that this won't happen now, but in the future, because one day he will be in his interests. Ramil explains to the boy that this is his initial investment. Takumi understands this and thinks to himself that mercy is not for people and that this is the position of a merchant. The man offers to accompany him on this trip. The guy responds positively and agrees. The man asks why he is going to the capital. The guy is shy and says that he would like to meet one of his acquaintances. He thinks to himself that he would be glad to meet at least one of the three heroes. The guy turns to Remield and asks why he is going there. The man answers hesitantly and says that everything is complicated and confusing right now. He can't give details yet, but he needs to suddenly appear in the capital. He says that he had an important business meeting, but it was canceled. However, now he needs to get to the capital at any cost. The guy thinks to himself that this meeting is so important that he can't cancel it. Suddenly, the carriage stops. Takumi asks why they stopped, and Remield tells him not to worry about it. He says that maybe they are bandits, and one way or another, the Night Owls will deal with them. Takumi asks if it is a bandit attack. The adventurers outside fight the attackers. The man says that he couldn't take a normal escort on a trip like this, and these adventurers were more skilled than he expected. So let Takumi leave it to them. The man picks up the bottle and says that the carriage is no longer shaking and asks why they don't have a drink while they have the chance. He pours the contents of the bottle into a glass and says that he still has some snacks. Takumi thinks to himself that there might be a fierce battle going on outside the carriage, and the man enjoys the pleasant smell. Takumi is sure that he has already gone through many troubles and difficulties, so it is not surprising that he is so confident in himself and in them. The guy also notes his difference from the king 1,000 times. The trip was smooth and comfortable. Romilda's carriage was custom-made and was spacious and luxurious. The guy suggests that it is like a private jet in their world. Takumi thought to himself that as a commoner he had never been on such a wonderful trip. He was fed exquisite dishes. Occasionally, they would be attacked by beasts or bandits. But it seemed that the adventurers the man hired had no problem with this. Takumi speculated that it was because of Remield's foresight skill. Thinking about his skills, Takumi thinks that only one skill has been added to his status, the creation of all things. He's not very important, but at the same time he's a level 2. Takumi wonders how useful he can really be. The carriage will arrive in the capital tomorrow. Suddenly, the carriage stops, and Takumi assumes that it is bandits again. The man next to him thinks and says that he has traveled between the city and the capital many times, but this trip is different. Takumi doesn't understand what he's talking about. Remiel explains to him that this time there were already 2 bandit attacks and 1 beast. That is, there were 3 attacks. He doesn't remember anything similar happening to him and assumes that it is the influence of the Demon King. Remiel says he thinks the world is changing. Takumi thinks to himself that he has heard before, that this has happened before when a person from another world was summoned to this one, just like him. The guy thinks to himself that maybe there are some really big changes going on. The man says that for traders, a time of change is a time of opportunity. Because if you are one step ahead and invest a lot in advance, you can make a lot of money. So changes in the world are welcome. The guy says that this is great and notes his similarity to businessmen. The man is surprised that they haven't finished yet, because it's late. The guy says that it's quiet now and suggests going to have a look. When he goes outside, he finds no one. He wonders where the word dark night is and suddenly notices something below. He realizes that the coachman is lying below. The guy rushes to his aid and asks if he is okay. Suddenly, someone comes up from behind. One of the men says that if he hadn't gone out, he would have lived a little longer. The man shouts that he's been caught. Suddenly, Takumi catches fire and falls down. Remield comes outside and asks Takumi what happened. Suddenly, he notices the whole situation. One of the men appears behind him and tells him not to move. Remield is surprised and asks what he is going to do now. After all, once the guild finds out about this, the registration of new adventurers will be closed and they will be punished. The man laughs and asks him about it. He doesn't understand what he's talking about. The man says that according to the guild, it wasn't them who got this job, but another party. Remiel asks him what he just said. The bandit replies that they just wanted to split the profits. However, the guy next to him explains to him that they were killed. The man gets angry, and the bandit says that they want his item, which he carries with him using the treasure skill. After all, this skill allows one to carry things and jewelry so that no one but him can get them. The bandit tells him to get it right now. Remield clenches his fist and tells him not to even dream about it, because he will not obey some vile people like him. And even if he dies, the treasure will not open. The bandit says that everyone says so and assumes that he is lying. The guy says they have a poison called gunzuru, which is not deadly but is so painful that a man will beg him to die. The bandit asks if he thinks he can handle it and wonders if he wants to try it. Remild is scared. One of the bandits says that he has a choice, suffer pain or open the treasure. Suddenly, one of them notices some movement. He wonders what it was. Suddenly, Takumi jumps up and shouts that he will never forgive them. The bandits cannot believe it and exclaim in surprise, just like Remild. Takumi says he was shocked at first by the sudden burst of fire. One of the men is shocked that he is standing up and can move at all. The guy says he doesn't know, but for some reason when he was burning, he didn't even feel hot, and it felt like he just didn't have a body. His clothes were burned to ashes. He creates another normal outfit. The bandits are surprised by the outfit. Remild also doesn't understand what just happened. Takumi says that he can't forgive those who do this to A-rank adventurers. He's not going to talk about fairness. However, it's unfair that there are younger adventurers working hard to raise their rank. One of the bandits says that he would have stayed alive if he had continued to pretend to be dead, and he draws a knife, preparing for a fight. He says that without a magic sword, he cannot be defeated. Takumi remains silent. The bandits are surprised by what he does. Takumi creates his magic sword, Frista. Takumi and the man are ready to fight. One of the bandits thinks that it is a copy skill. The man is surprised that he imitated his sword very quickly and screams that he is finished, attacking. The guy parries the attack. The bandit is surprised that he parried it, but then denies it and suggests that he was just lucky. He smiles and falls again, asking him how he likes it. Takumi is surprised. Suddenly, he understands everything and starts to reflect the attacks. He shouts for him to receive. The bandit doesn't understand how he repeats his blows and reflects all his attacks. The man doesn't understand how this is happening. He looks at his broken sword and thinks that his sword was supposed to be just a copy with similar abilities. Takumi thinks to himself that he was just trying to defend himself from his attacks, but it turned out even better than he expected. He also remembers that he saw something like this in historical films, but in real life, fighting is harder than he thought. Remild is surprised and thinks to himself how this is happening. The man says that it is impossible and that he did not think that he would have to take out this demonic sword. He takes out a blade that strikes with destructive force. One of his teammates yells at him not to use that sword because Takumi's skill creates things that are stronger, and he only needs to know the name of the ball to copy it. Takumi thinks to himself that L knows the name of the ball and is willing to reproduce it. He doesn't know what kind of demon sword it is, but wonders if he can create a similar one just by giving it a name. On the other hand, he didn't know the name of the rocket launcher either. And it turns out that you just need a specific image to create anything. Ashlyn yells at him not to worry and laughs because this sword is impossible to imitate. He turns to the main character and shouts that he is dead. The bandit attacks him and cuts Takumi's sword in half. Takumi screams out in surprise. Remild calls his name, worried about him. The man asks how and tells him that this demon sword has great power and sucks all the life energy out of the opponent. He says that it is not at the same level as Fisto. He didn't want to use it, but he can't help himself. After all, this sword has additional skills to strengthen the body. The man says that Takumi will regret getting in his way. Takumi doesn't understand how this can be and thinks that he needs to somehow surpass his sword. He repeats the words that this sword is demonic. Ashlyn screams that she will tear him to pieces. Takumi forces himself to think. The man screams at him to prepare for death, then quickly attacks. However, Takumi also decides to attack the bandit. Ashlyn's sword breaks in half. He exclaims in surprise. The guy says that this time he has created something simpler and throws the katana into its sheath. He didn't think about the demonic and simply created the sword Kenshi on Uesugi, the god of war during the Sengoku period. Shining. Lightning weapon, thin blade, thunder strike, and other names of this blade. According to rumors, it is capable of destroying strong armor with one blow at the speed of lightning. This is exactly what Takumi thought of. After all, this is a famous Japanese sword, and it seems that it can even surpass the mighty sword from another world. Takumi turns around and thinks that even though he deflected the demon sword, he doesn't understand how they got hold of such a weapon. Even though they are the bad guys, such a weapon can harm them. Ashlyn scolds him and turns to his comrades. Everyone understands him at a glance and attacks. The guy notices that needles are being stuck into his shoulder. The bandit says that this is a deadly, poisonous sting, and nothing can save him. Another bandit casts a spell and summons lightning. She hits the main character. Ashlyn thinks to herself that the triple attack, the demons of the swordsman, alchemist, and poisonous, this is the terror of the owls of the dark night. When the lightning disappears, Takamine smiles a little and asks what happened. It never worked, even with its brightness. The bandits don't understand why. It withstood the lightning strike and the poison didn't soak in. Takumi recalls that it reminded him of the treatments with needles, electric shocks, and cauterization that he used to receive at a rehabilitation clinic. He feels a sense of relief in his shoulders. Ashlyn calls him a monster and says he has poison and lightning resistance skills. The second bandit says he will check his skills with his skill. It scans the main character and looks at his skills. Ashlyn yells at him to check his weak points, which he has no resistance to. The man notices his skills of resistance to everything that exists. He does not understand what is happening, because the list does not end. The man screams that this cannot be. The sorcerer understands that almost all attacks against him are useless. Ashlyn says that then he is not a monster, but a real god. Takumi says that now he is sure of what he did some time ago. Now he has figured out how to help that man without hurting anyone. He creates a flashbang grenade. He saw it in a foreign detective series. It is not a dangerous grenade for suppressing terror. In fact, it is a grenade. It immobilizes the enemy with a loud sound and a flash of light. However, he can also end up in the field of action. He suddenly stops and remarks that since it is something he created, if he throws it away, it will disappear. However, he remembers that the pistol bullets and rocket launchers are still there. Takumi speculates that it was because he had the weapon in his hands. He pulls out Chika and asks what her name is. He notices that the grenade begins to hiss and lies on the bandits, thinking that this is not the case when he thought everything through. The bandits realize that something bad is happening. Suddenly, there is a flash. The bandits clutch their eyes and ears. Takumi doesn't understand why it didn't hit him, but he is convinced that it worked. Takumi creates a rope and ties up the announced bandits. Ramil and he continue on. After some time, Takumi thanks him for giving him a ride. The action takes place at the main branch of the Avantis company. The young guy thanks him for saving the chairman, and on behalf of the rest of the employees, he also thanks him. Many people bow to him and thank him. Takumi is confused and dispersed. He knew that Ramild was a rich merchant, but there were a lot of workers here. He asks them to raise their heads. They tell him that tilting at 90 degrees for 5 seconds is the rule. Ramild turns to Takumi, saying that he saved him and now he can hug his newborn grandson. The man will be able to fulfill the purpose for which he went to the royal capital. Takumi says that he now understands why he came here and thinks to himself that this really is more important than any other matter. The man says his student wanted to start a business in the royal capital, and he helped him. However, after falling in love with his daughter, they ran away from home. Ramil says that they got married and didn't even tell him, and then suddenly they told him that he had a grandson. The girl explains that they did this because her father would have made a fuss, and because of this he was deprived. Give 5 as a fact. The girl points out that there are many gifts on the carriage and calls him an idiot. Takumi thinks of Ramilda as a good person who cares about his grandson. The old man says that he was never able to thank him, but Takumi says that they did nothing to thank him. Moreover, he delivered him to the royal capital in a carriage, and that is definitely enough. The man says that as a merchant, he is used to expressing his gratitude with money. However, if he does not like such a reward, he can offer him some alternative. He asks the protagonist to tell him if he needs anything, and he will try to do everything in his power. The guy thanks him for this, and says that he doesn't need anything for now. A man approaches the protagonist and asks if he was ever an adventurer. Takumi doesn't understand what he's talking about. The man explains to him that before hiring the Dark Night Owls, he mentioned his name as an adventurer from that guild, and immediately after that, everyone became very lively. That's why he felt it was wrong to part with him right after entering the royal capital. Takumi says that he only showed up at the Lorenta Guild when he was there for a short time. The old man says he understands and suggests that the guild might have made a mistake. Ramil tells him that he will pray for the safety of his journey and asks him to take care of himself. Takumi walks along a busy street in the capital. He notices that the royal capital has become lively. He remembers that the last time he ran through these places, he saw no one except soldiers. He thinks that it is now peaceful and calm here. Suddenly, he is called from behind. He turns around and realizes that there is no one there. He thinks that he thought he heard someone calling him. Someone asks where he is looking and says it is him. Takumi asks if he called him. The guy answers positively. Takumi asks if they've met before. The guy doesn't understand what he's talking about and says that they met in the capital. Takumi repeats his words and still cannot understand who is standing in front of him. This is the capital of the Kingdom of Caledonia. About 2 months ago, he was summoned here along with 3 other heroes, after which he was groundlessly accused of attempting to assassinate the king and declared wanted. However, thanks to one of the 3 heroes putting pressure on the king, the charges against him were dropped. This smug king is convinced that if he has heroes, the country is saved. But it is not that simple. In any case, he must personally thank the one who stood up for him. That is why he returned to the capital to find this hero. Takumi asks the guy who he is. He replies that he is Tanji. Takumi asks him again. However, the guy says that he probably didn't know that was his character's name in the online game. She says that although she didn't want to reveal her real name, his name is Takuchi Kanji. Takumi asks him again and thinks to himself that he has heard this name somewhere before. The guy gets angry that he still doesn't recognize him and then says that he is Kenjin. The guy doesn't understand again, and then it dawns on him and he's surprised that it's that same Kenjin. The guy gets angry, calls him a slowpoke. Takumi thinks to himself that he doesn't look like himself at all and wonders what happened to his body. He doesn't understand where all his elegance has gone and thinks that all that's left of his former self is his glasses. He says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. Kenjin says that he hasn't met people from the real world for a long time and that he now lives in a castle and invites him to visit because it's pretty cool there. And there are sweets. Takumi thinks that he doesn't need sweets, of course, but he agrees anyway. Upon entering the castle, the knight lines up in front of them and a sage thanks them. Takumi thinks that this is exactly what he expected from a hero. He is welcome everywhere. The guy invites him in. Takumi notices that everything smells of food. However, he is surprised by the beautiful view. After all, both the appearance and the furnishings of the room look quite luxurious. Even despite the wrappers and skewers of food scattered everywhere, it makes a strong impression. Kenjin sits down on the chair with difficulty, then screams under it. Takumi notices this and is surprised. The guy tells him to get comfortable too and breathes heavily. Takumi thinks to himself that they've only walked a short distance and he's already out of breath, and he's only in his early 20s. He wonders if he'll be okay. Kenjin says he feels nostalgic when he looks at the protagonist's face. He mentions their summoning and offers him fried squid. Takumi refuses. He says that time has flown by very quickly and asks how he is doing here. He asks him to stop calling him that and says that he is now a sage, Tanji. The guy offers him meatballs. Takumi politely declines again and repeats his name to himself. The sage says that after that battle, he didn't have much to do since there were no smartphones or internet. He, while chewing something, says that food has become his only entertainment, and because of this, he has gained a little weight. Takumi notes that the guy has gained a lot of weight and compares it to a diet commercial where the before and after are reversed. The guy also mentions that Takumi was wanted by the police. He thought it was strange that he disappeared after that battle. He also says that he should thank Nene. The Takumi realized that it was Nene. The guy says that he heard about it briefly, but it seems that something, and who stood up for him was Nene. Tanji also mentions that the king's anger did not subside because he simply had no choice due to the support of the church. Takumi doesn't understand what he's talking about and clarifies that the church is the one who says Amen. The guy says that it's Christianity, and in this world it's the cult of saints, also registered as a state religion. He explains that Nene is a saint, and so the church demanded that she personally join their ranks. So Nene made the condition that in that case they would allow her to use the political power of the church to put pressure on the king. Takumi clarifies that Nene only joined the church to stand up for him. The guy asks him not to shout so loudly because he might spill the broth. The sage answers positively. He suggests that Nene will be better off there. After all, it is better to be under the protection of the church than to serve this king. The guy says she's a saint and the church treats her with respect. Then he offers her fried chicken. Takumi refuses and thinks about how he's been eating all this time. He asks where Nene is now, to which he receives the answer that he does not know the exact location but leaves. Rumors are that somewhere far away to the southwest of the royal capital, in the city of Fatima. Now Takumi had already decided where to go next. Takumi also asks where Aki is now. The sage says that he went on a journey to defeat the Demon King. Takumi is surprised by this and asks again. He says that he is easily influenced by the atmosphere. That's why at the victory parade he declared that he would be the one to crush the Demon King's army. Takumi says that he understands and wonders if everything will be okay with him. He turns to Kenjin and is asked what he is going to do. He says that he is Tanji and he is going to live here for some time. From the very beginning he was weak, that is, he liked to sit at home. The royal capital is also famous for being a hub for all the wonderful things that exist in the country and beyond. Tanji strolls through the food stalls every day, and there are still so many things to try. Takumi says that he understands everything, and it's time for him to go. The sage is surprised that he is already leaving. Takumi says that he has been sitting here too long, and it will be bad if the king finds him here. The boy agrees with him and asks if he will take takoyaki with him. Takumi refuses. Already on the street, Tanji calls out to him and shouts that if he gets into trouble or needs help, he should remember that the four of them are friends. He says that if something happens, no matter what it is, he can always turn to him for help. The boy laughs. Takumi calls him by name and thanks him. He says with a smile on his face that he will definitely remember these words. The sage is a little embarrassed because he asked to call him Tanji. Takumi leaves smiling. He had left the capital in a hurry earlier and was glad that he was able to return here again this time. Caledonian branch of the Adventurers Guild. Someone inside is cursing loudly. The man gets very angry and asks how it was that they didn't find it. He says that they even involved those who weren't on duty. They involved the whole guild in the search, but it was all in vain. The girl next to him asks the head of the secretariat not to be nervous. After all, they know for sure that the aforementioned person is somewhere in the capital. Another person says they have set up a checkpoint and increased surveillance at the exit of the city, so it is only a matter of time before he is discovered. The man slams his fist on the table and calls them naive. After all, they are looking for a man who calls himself Takumi, and he is not as naive as they are. Another girl says she heard he single-handedly defeated a squad of Dark Knight owls. The guy sitting next to her says the owls were always careless. He laughs and says that they were defeated by a passenger in the carriage they attacked, and then that they are idiots. But there must be a limit. He says that basically all they did was abuse the guild's position, so they just got there just deserts. People confirm this and laugh. The boss gets angry and calls him an optimistic idiot in his head. Unexpectedly, the number of defeated monsters was more than 78,000, and the squad's rank suddenly rose to S. And in order to prevent chaos, a decision was made. No one will be told about this. But eventually, there was an idiot in the guild who blabbed about everything, and the top brass of the guild decided to find out what was going on. They came to the conclusion that the one who raised their rank was this Takumi they were looking for. If he really defeated the owls, then even an A-rank adventurer would be no match for him. The girl describes his appearance and says that he looks like a nice guy, about 18 years old. The guy asks why the higher-ups ordered to find him then. The leader says that he would be very useful to them in case of unforeseen situations. Therefore, they want him to join the guild so that he can fully demonstrate his abilities. One of the guys says that this is, of course, good, and the second one adds and says that if even the guild couldn't find him, then they definitely won't be able to. The leader thinks to himself that he has to force him to join the guild because they are in a difficult situation. In all fairness, they can't take Blue Wolf Main's SS rank, because the system works properly and they didn't do anything that could lead to the cancellation of the result. Due to the fact that another person accidentally joined their squad, they mistakenly received the highest rank in the world. However, such an explanation will not be accepted by society. Since the founding of the guild, the top brass has not created ways to solve problematic non-standard situations. So it was decided that the best solution would be to force him to join the Blue Wolf's Main. However, he understands that this is easier said than done. However, while he is in the capital, they have time. Suddenly, the girl gives in to the question about his appearance. She says that there are people with dark hair, but she does not remember people who also had black eyes. The guy says that he heard that such an appearance is typical for people from an Eastern country. He mentions that there are definitely no such people in the capital. Another girl says that she saw a man in the city who exactly matched the description but passed by because it seemed to her that her eyes deceived her. The guy disagrees with her and says that he saw someone like that too, but he didn't look like someone who could fight monsters. Another adventurer agrees and says that she saw him too, but she didn't think that he could fight monsters either, because he has a peaceful face. The fourth person also says that he doesn't look like an adventurer, and he wasn't wearing any equipment, so he looked like an ordinary village boy. The girl says that she got the impression that even she could easily defeat him. The guy supports her. The leader gets angry and screams sharply. He says that while they are idle here, he can already leave the capital, and they order them to thoroughly check everyone who leaves the city. He asks if they understand, and even if they think it can't be him, they can't let him go. When everyone leaves, he asks himself how he can not be nervous. He turns around and wonders what kind of person this is, and he thinks that it would be better if he himself told about it. Suddenly, he realizes that if this guy is smart enough, he can easily deceive the guild staff. He recalls the girl's words about how she thought her eyes deceived her, and the guy's words about how he wasn't wearing any gear. The leader screams that this can't be true. He asks who this guy is, and calls him a complete idiot. Takumi walks down the street with a smile on his face, thinking about the main cathedral in Faltum. He wonders what kind of place it is. The wooden cart was moving along a rocky terrain and was shaking violently from every hole and stone. The boy was getting sleepy. He sat peacefully, with his eyes closed, and slightly shook his head from the shaking. He dozed peacefully, sitting in the cart, until his head began to hang down too much and he woke up with a start. The people sitting nearby covered their mouths with their hands, laughing quietly. It's Takumi Saiki. Now he is heading to the city of Faltim. This time, he chose to travel by cart. It might take a little longer, but he wouldn't have to worry about getting lost along the way. By the way, about carriages, he didn't know any other carriages except the first-class carriage of the rich merchant Ramild. But for getting from one place to another, even this simple carriage was quite good. But it is very difficult not to doze off under the sound of the wheels. To get to the holy city of Faltamu, you need to cross the strait from the port city of Mizantos by ferry. This is the classic pilgrimage route to the Holy Land, stretching from the capital. There was even an express carriage that went there directly without stopping, but he decided to go by the regular carriages that transported between cities. The trip with transfers would take longer, but it would be much cheaper. He looked at the map. Using the map of transfer points, he looked for where he would have to make his next transfer. Someone was yelling at a kid off to the side. He was yelling at him to pay for the ride or he would report him to the guards. He was yelling back that he couldn't just give one kid a ride. He said that this was not right. It was his business. He actually had to pay for the horse's feed and for the repair of the cart, too. He grabbed the child by the clothes and was about to take him away. The child struggled, screaming to let go of his thing. He needed to go quickly. The hero approached the quarreling people and pretended to be familiar with the child. He said that, didn't he tell him not to go too far away from him, but there was nothing he could do. The boy asked who he was, but Takumi, without explaining, just put his finger to his mouth, signaling him to shut up. He approached the screaming man, handing him the money and telling him what trouble his troublesome companion had caused him. He handed over the fare, and the driver visibly softened. He continued to pretend to be angry, although you could immediately tell from his face that everything had already been settled and he was only doing this for show. Since they had paid, everything was fine, but next time they needed to be more careful. The child screamed at the hero, not understanding what all this meant. He did not ask to pay for him. Takumi apologized for interfering, but he suddenly became curious about where a small child like him decided to go for free. But the child objected, saying that it shouldn't bother him at all. He thought he was right and apologized, asking him to forget what he had just said. He put his palms together and smiled. The child did not understand why he had such a contented expression on his face. And after thinking for a bit, he decided to tell her. He was going to the port city of Adalast because he had urgent business there. The hero looked at the map behind him looking for the named city. In fact, he was also going to Adalast and, if the child did not mind, he offered him to join him. He only asked again in surprise. This is true, it is different from the planned plan, but since Adalast is a port city, it means that there will be at least one ferry that can be used to cross the strait, although it will still be slightly off course. The child did not understand what the phrase "keep company" meant. The hero said that it was possible to travel alone, but he was bored, so he looked for a suitable friend to travel with. Then he asked the child for his name. The child introduced himself as Anji and called Saiki his brother. The hero asked Anji if he knew the way to Adalast. It turned out that he had traveled there many times by cart so he wouldn't get lost, but he didn't understand why he needed to do that. Then the hero offered to make a deal. The child will show him the way to Adlast, and in return he will take him there. It is a mutually beneficial deal in which no money is required. He will be shown the way, and the child will be taken safely to his destination. Naturally, he also won't ask him to return the money he paid for it earlier. He should like this idea. Hearing that he doesn't have to pay, the child quickly agreed to this deal and looked pleased, as did Saiku. To get around, Takumi created a motorcycle with a sidecar. It was the first time Anji had seen something like that. It is ideal for traveling together. He saw it in one series about heroes. Once he was so carried away by this series that he even secretly got a motorcycle license from his parents. He started the engine, and smoke instantly appeared from the rear pipes of the motorcycle, and the motorcycle roared with all its power. Anji did not understand anything, but his brother's skill was very convenient for him. In this case, Takumi asked him to show him the way, and they instantly rushed forward with speed. The people on the street were very shocked by what they saw. Anji asked what this transport was powered by. Was it really magic? The hero, not knowing what to answer, said that it was close to the truth. The child clearly enjoyed the ride. He laughed and asked to go even faster. His face was shining with happiness and joy. Watching this, the hero himself smiled, understanding how much he enjoyed it. It may not concern him, but there must be a good reason for such a small child to set out on a journey alone. With the child's delighted cries, they rode on. At this time, at the branch of the Adventurers Guild, Caledonia. There they found out that the presence of a person named Takumi in the capital was not confirmed. The guildmaster was clearly unhappy with this, and her subordinate saw it as well. She sighed sullenly, thinking about what she had heard. In a hurry to relieve the atmosphere, the agitated man nevertheless said that, however, they had managed to get some important information. They asked for the cooperation of an adventurer with the search skill. They eventually found out that he was heading to the city of Falteam. The girl was surprised by this fact. A little later, the Laurent branch of the Adventurers Guild. They received new information from the Royal Capital branch that Takumi was heading to Falteam City. This news clearly shocked them. They hadn't even thought about it. The young man was surprised, because they thought the hero was going to the Royal Capital. Another girl nearby noticed that he traveled quite often, judging by his observation. The dark-haired woman also added that, besides this, he moved much faster than expected. By the time they returned to the village of Vanana, he was already not far from the royal capital. After all, Takumi turned out to be not so simple. Although for the guy, it was clear from the very beginning, because he single-handedly defeated the Owls of the Dark Night, which in itself already showed how strong he was. But Takumi had a reason for keeping his abilities a secret, and now, because of their carelessness, the entire guild was looking for him. The leader was very worried about this. He clearly felt guilty about it. Without causing harm, make Takumi join the Adventurers Guild is an official request, main wolf signal from the guild. However, if they want, they can refuse this task. The girl next to him sighed, saying that everything was fine and they would still accept this task. There was nothing they could do now that things had turned out this way. Besides, they wanted to apologize to him personally. The girl was standing by the horse-drawn carriage. She was explaining to the guild boys how they could get from Laurent to Faltima by land. She thought they would succeed this time. And she also hoped that they would be able to get along with the one who defeated the Dark Night Owls, because the S-rank adventurers had already started to act. She told them again that they should be more careful. The boy promised that they would find Takumi before the noise started, and then he gave the order for the horses to move forward. He was accompanied by 2 more girls sitting in the carriage. At this time, the main character stopped the motorcycle at the seashore because they finally reached Adlast. Seagulls were flying around and many ships were moored nearby. The child was also in a good mood. He clearly enjoyed the trip, as expected from a vehicle using an engine. On a cart, they would have traveled for about 5 days, but on a motorcycle, they got there in 3-4 hours. Maybe partly this is due to Anji, who kept shouting for them to go even faster. The happy child ran forward. Waving and thanking his brother, he promised that as soon as he finished his business, he would come back to him. Thanks to the cheerful Anji, the trip was very favorable. Only at parting the child said that he would come to him again. Did he really know where the hero was heading? He turned around. He remembered the words that when you arrive in a city, the first thing you should do is visit the Adventurers Guild, because all the information that can possibly be sent to the guild goes there. That was the advice he got from Mr. Ramild, and he thought he should take advantage of it as soon as possible. He met many bored people along the way. The men sat silently at the table outside, their heads in their hands. There were those who simply lay on the ground, bored, and some sat with their heads down. He had imagined the port city to be much more lively. Something seemed wrong there. He walked inside the establishment, pushing with his hand through the small wooden doors, which were even smaller than he was, and they creaked open. He was greeted by a bespectacled employee who was wiping glasses with a rag. He looked around. Inside, besides him and the employee, there were 3 more large men, similar to adventurers, who were drinking. They immediately paid attention to the hero, silently watching him. One of them, clearly with the intention of insulting, told the hero not to tell him that he was a so-called adventurer. The man was no longer young and wore a white bandana on his head. He was holding a mug of alcohol. The second man with scars on his face added that he should give up this occupation, otherwise he would die by accident. After that, all 3 laughed. I consider my jokes successful. The third in their company, unlike the others, had light hair and was more well-groomed. The hero, smiling good-naturedly, replied that he was just passing by. After that, he turned away and addressed the employee, asking if the Adventurers Guild was here. The people sitting behind even fell silent when the guy simply ignored them. He exhaled and replied that it was so. The guild had only been here for 2 months, and it so happened that the owner of the local tavern had allowed them to use this place. He asked the guy if he wanted to drink anything. Psyche smiled and asked if they had any milk. The employee asked him again, surprised. The 3 sitting in the back laughed even harder. He came to the tavern for milk. Was this really a joke? But they were ignored, and they realized that he was not joking, and the laughter died down. The employee, embarrassed by this situation, replied that milk as an ingredient for cocktails, of course, is available, but the guy is definitely very brave. He placed a glass with the drink he had previously asked for in front of him. He said that everyone here was a little disappointed because there was no decent work lately. Well, if you look at the current Adalast, it might seem like the whole city was chained. The hero asked if anything had happened. It turned out that it was not just something. Adalast is a port city, but now no one can go to sea, which means it is impossible to catch fish and transport goods. The hero screamed in surprise, asking what had happened. The worker crossed his arms over his chest with obvious displeasure, and said that it turned out that they had pirates and they were blocking the exit to the sea. Sea traffic was completely closed, and their ship was simply enormous. They say that pirates have been around these shores since the time of the previous lord, but it is not clear why they decided to appear again. At sea, even adventurers are no match for them. The hero, who clearly did not expect such a situation, asked about what was happening. It was impossible to swim across the strait either. The worker explained that if by ferry, the hero could forget about it. Now even the smallest boat would not sail from this port. If he was going to another city, he would have to take a detour. The guy thought about pirates. Of course, it is possible to get there by land, but he is worried about Anzi, who has come such a long way here. Walking along the street, he wandered into the port where the boats were. Sitting on it and dangling his legs over the water, he thought about how he had the skill of creating everything in the world for just such cases. He wanted to try to talk to the pirates personally. This seemed like a great idea to him, and he was inspired. He used the skill to create a small boat in the shape of a swan with a rudder. Slowly, he sailed further and further from the shore. Now, he needs to go out to sea as long as possible so that the pirates decide to catch him. He could create a motorboat, but it's too fast and hard to catch. But a pedal boat isn't really a boat, and it stands out too much, so it's a perfect choice. The waves rocked his water bike from side to side. An unexpected turn. A huge pirate ship accidentally finds the swan's boat. What other surprises does fate have in store for the main character? A huge black ship was bearing down on his little boat. Their sizes were so different that his sea bike and the pirate ship could be compared to an ant and an elephant. The ship creaked in the waves. It didn't look like they were going to attack it, just blocking the way for anyone trying to swim through. There was a rustling sound from above the ship, and the pirate crew dropped a ladder of ropes and logs down to it. The men on deck were waving their arms at him as if they wanted him to get up. He doubted they would attack him right away. He just didn't know what they would do when they found out he didn't have the gold. Having climbed up, he stood surrounded by pirates with his hands raised. He looked for the leader of the pirates. From the side, he was called Brother. He turned his head and saw a man with a beard. In front of him was Anji, who introduced the ship's captain as the bearded Uncle Gal. His name is actually Gallo. but Uncle Gallo is hard to pronounce, so he should be called Uncle Gal. Then the child began to introduce Takumi's brother. He said that he was very cool. True, a little strange. Later, he added that he was not a little strange. Takumi greeted everyone. Anji had known Uncle Gal since he was born. He is exactly as the hero sees him, gloomy, always in a bad mood, and often swears. But not at all as fierce as it may seem, so he can be calm. You can talk to him the same way as with everyone else. The hero apologized, saying that he wanted to clarify something. He asked about whether this was a pirate ship. The child and the captain answered him in one voice that this was not so. The hero was confused. He folded his arms over his chest and looked at them questioningly. Things were getting stranger. If this wasn't true, then there had been a mistake in that story from the very beginning, but there was too much that wasn't clear. Then he asked what kind of rumors were going around the city in that case, and he also had information that they were attacking approaching ships and blocking the exit to the sea. The captain, sighing, said that was true. He looked completely uninterested. The hero thought that this was what was called piracy. At this point, Angie intervened, furiously asking her uncle why he didn't say it was all a misunderstanding. After all, everything was not at all as Takumi thought. Unable to bear the injustice, Anji shouted that they were doing this to protect the city and the sailors. From the tension, the child's face even turned red, and a few drops of sweat appeared. All this is necessary to protect the city from the kraken living not far away in the sea. Uncle and his team attack ships because of fierce natural disasters. The child actively waved his hands and gesticulated, trying to prove all this to his new acquaintance. The captain patted the active child on the shoulder, telling him to calm down. He looked sad, apparently, and he was still a little worried about this issue. Even someone who knows what's going on won't understand such an explanation from Angie. But apparently nothing can be done. It seems that everything will have to be explained to him himself. He said that it happened about 2 months ago. A monster of Z rank, a kraken, appeared in the sea, a huge squid with tentacles, which began to attack ships entering these waters. As a rule, it wraps its tentacles around everything that appears on the surface of the water, so ships become easy prey. That is why they decided to close the exit to the sea. The hero realized what had happened. In that case, it would be good for everyone if someone got rid of him. The captain said that he really thought it was so easy to get rid of a Z-rank monster, and he then called himself an adventurer. The hero explained that he was not an adventurer. The captain, shocked, asked him again what he had said. He said excitedly that he hadn't come here because he had accepted a mission to exterminate pirates in the city. The hero explained that he simply wanted to cross the strait, but he had been told that to do that, he had to do something about the pirates first. The captain asked if he had really come here intending to do anything. Smiling, the hero replied that he had. He came to this without a weapon and alone. As Anji had said, the captain now also thought he was strange. The child smiled because his words had been true, and he was not the only one who saw it. The captain asked him to listen. He explained that monsters are usually divided into ranks from G to A, but there is a special rank, Z. It is also called a natural disaster. In ascending order, the ranks are G, F, E, D, C, B, A, S, Z. The hero asked about the rank of natural disaster. In other words, it is something that cannot be controlled like a natural disaster. Therefore, since it cannot be destroyed, they can at least prevent attacks on ships. But the hero asked, in that case, so that there would be no misunderstandings, wouldn't it be better to explain everything to people? This is a pretty logical thought. The captain thought so too. However, those who saw them while they were helping the crews of the sunken ships most likely misunderstood, deciding that they were the ones who sank them. After that, adventurers began to go out to sea in an attempt to get rid of the pirates, eventually becoming food for the kraken. It broke their boats into pieces, and the people drowned. So people decided that it was all a fake. Besides, the appearance of this ship has not changed since the old days when it belonged to pirates, so even if he tried to explain everything, no one would believe it. That's why everything turned out that way for them. The hero thought that, after all, this ship really was a pirate ship, as he had assumed from the very beginning. For some reason, this fact brought a smile to his face. But is there really a reason to do this, knowing that they will have such a reputation? Isn't it the duty of a feudal lord to keep an eye on security? Anji decided to explain, but made Takumi's brother promise not to be too surprised. In fact, Anji is a girl, and also the heiress of the Alcuin family ruling Adelast, Marquise Angelina Alcuin. The hero was shocked. She apologized for it, not that she was going to hide it, but that's how it happened. The hero accepted everything instantly and looked carefree, which shocked everyone. He said with a bright smile that Angie actually had long hair, and he hadn't noticed it at all. He understood that if she didn't hide them under her hat, they would get in the way of her travels, but it seemed he still didn't understand anything. He carelessly patted the child on the head as if consoling her. The captain of the ship called him stupid. That's not something he should be surprised at. He should have asked something like, Angie is really a girl, or you're the heir of Lord Adelast. That's what the captain thought he should have said, not something else. Takumi looked intently at Angie's face without looking away. This confused her greatly. Only later did he understand everything. The girl screamed that he hadn't noticed that she was actually a girl. It turns out he didn't even pay much attention to the fact that she was a girl because he was too distracted by her hair. The girl was very upset by this and began to call him names, shouting at the entire ship. They sailed further into the sea, and the ship began to sail through large caves. Inside were many other people and ships. The hero was surprised, looking around. Angie called out to him, calling him to her. There is a shelter hidden inside the cave. It is clear that this place is not visible from the sea or from the shore, and you can quietly watch the ships leaving the port. Takumi and the child walked hand in hand into the cave behind the captain. The man began to tell how about 30 years ago, this cave was overrun with pirates and was an untouchable free zone. Pirates have their own rules, too. No needless killing, no touching children or women, no robbing the poor. However, one day, those who did not want to follow these rules gained influence. They began to rob. At that time, the ruler of Adelasta, Angie's grandfather, came directly to the chief of the pirates, the captain's father. The Lord wanted to get rid of the unruly pirates and restore peace to the seas, so he decided to offer his help. The captain's father, who had always been disgusted by pirates who did not follow their own laws, accepted Lord Adelast's offer. Of course, the Lord couldn't openly help the pirates, so officially only the pirates participated. But only thanks to the Lord's support, order was restored, and that group of pirates was brought under control. From then on, they continued to secretly monitor the order at sea. The hero realized that this was why, even though they were misunderstood, they still continued to protect the ships that went out to sea. He looked at Angie, the daughter of a lord who was also close to pirates. It turns out that using both of these facts, she can easily find out his location in the city. That's why she said she would find him when she arrived in the city. However, when Anzi's grandfather passed away, the girl's father took his place, and the promise given earlier was, unfortunately, forgotten. He decided to send a large fleet and eradicate piracy. The hero, hearing about this, could not contain his emotions and screamed. Having learned about this, Angie in a hurry first thing returned, thinking that she could persuade her father not to do this. But nothing came of it. In response, she heard only that everything had already been decided. She was very sad when she told about it. The captain remembered one thing and showed the boys an old chest. This chest contains the proof, the pact between Angie's grandfather and the pirates. They will be able to explain the situation if they provide the proof, and also explain everything about the misunderstanding that has arisen. More precisely, they could, but they do not have the most important detail, the key to this chest. There is only a photograph created with magic, which shows the key hanging around his father's neck. The hero suggested that in that case they simply break the chest. But simply breaking the chest was also impossible for them. It was enchanted, most likely. If you open it incorrectly, the contents inside will simply disappear. That's why Angie wanted Takumi to make a key. He can create this key with his skill of creating everything. But the captain said that it has to be a magic key and just repeating its shape won't be enough. But Angie believed in her brother because his skills were simply incredible. The captain only sighed at these words. He had never tried to create magic items before. He tried to create a magic key and rinsed it to the chest. The captain of the ship was skeptical about it. The girl asked her uncle to be quiet. Takumi inserted the key into the crack and turned it inside, heard a clicking sound, and a magic seal appeared. The child and Takumi were smiling and happy that they had succeeded. The captain behind them looked in disbelief at the fact that right in front of him was an open chest. And yet he managed to open the chest. Now they could prove that Uncle Gal and his crew had done nothing wrong. They had to hurry before the fleet arrived to explain everything to her father and everyone in the city. The child held the letter in his hand and was happy. But the captain apologized, explaining that it was too early to do that. There would be problems if the fleet did not arrive according to his plan. She did not understand why. The captain can't let them fight the Kraken alone. They're sailing here to exterminate pirates. That means they're heavily armed. If they join forces, they could defeat even a Z-rank monster with the help of the cannons on the ships. But Angie was afraid that her uncle would be in danger. Apparently, she had completely forgotten that he was a former pirate, but still a pirate. He wouldn't be sorry to say goodbye to his life. If they missed this chance, there might not be another opportunity to defeat him. He had a confident look. The hero thought about it and decided to ask whether it was possible that the captain had deliberately allowed rumors to spread in order to attract attention from the outside. Satsuki was quite perceptive, in the man's opinion. The captain hadn't thought it through that well, but since the situation had turned out this way, he decided to use it to his advantage. He was just worried that there would be no one to look after Angie, but thanks to him, they would be able to solve this. Angie was against it. She would never agree to this. She didn't want this. There were already tears in the child's eyes. But Uncle Gallus thinks they have no other choice. They must defeat him, or Adelast will die without being able to go to sea. And this is a port city. The man looked out the window with his back to the boys. The hero wondered how strong this Kraken was. The captain couldn't answer that because no one had ever managed to defeat it. It was huge and could easily break a ship's mast. It also seemed to be able to regenerate. The captain apologized, but he asked Takumi to take Angie home and also give the letter to her father. But he immediately refused without explaining anything. He sat at the table with his eyes closed and his hands folded in front of him. The captain decided that it really didn't concern him. Then the captain thought that after the refusal, the guy was going to return to his journey, but he wasn't going to do that either. The man was completely confused. Then, getting up from the table, the guy leaned on his hand. Psyche suggested that they go outside and talk for a while. The boy walked ahead of the others, while the captain, holding the child's hand, followed him. Standing on the shore, the captain asked why they had come there and what he was going to do. Even though he ended up in this city by accident, and his journey is still at the very beginning, he cannot simply pass by, pretending that it does not concern him. He couldn't stand to see Angie sad anymore. She still wiped her tears with her hand. Since they had decided to fight the huge monster in the sea, he decided to create something that would help them. Out of nowhere, a huge structure appeared, standing on which the guy towered high above the others. The two below looked at what was happening in shock. Takumi shouted to the captain what he thought about it. Now they could defeat the Kraken. The captain called him crazy, while the girl admired him, saying how amazing he was. Every boy's dream is a secret weapon. They can show the Kraken their determination. The Kraken mostly lives in the distant area, and the captain pointed his finger at the guy. Swimming with the current, he moves to the deep and then to the shallow parts. Now the current is directed from the ocean to the shore. That's why right now he should be closest to the shore. The hero realized that it was not for nothing that he was the captain of the ship. He knew the sea so well, it was very good in their situation. This place was about 1 kilometer away from them. The Kraken was much quicker than it looked. Would they get caught in its tentacles when they swam closer to it on the equipment created by the hero? This interested the captain greatly. Psyche had an idea about this, but it would be difficult to explain it to him. But the captain understood him. In any case, even without knowing the plan, he trusted him. No matter how you look at it, his skills are far beyond his understanding. The guy started to warm up his shoulder by rotating his hand in different directions in a circle. He hadn't done any physical exercise for a long time, so he should warm up a little before this fight. Then he decided to do squats while actively moving. The captain looked at his actions skeptically, but the child was very interested, and she asked what he was doing. He explained that it was Radio Charger, Issue 1. This charger was very popular in his native area. Angie also really wanted to try it, so she decided to join him because it sounded so fun. They did the exercises in sync with Psyche's count, and then they did breathing exercises, taking deep breaths. Finally, they finished their exercises so that they could live today full of energy. It seemed that only the captain behind him was bothered by this. The hero went forward to the cliff. He warned them that he was about to go into battle. The captain relied on him a lot, and Angie believed that he could handle it. She told him to be brave and encouraged him by clenching her fists. The hero gave a thumbs up and winked. He jumped off the cliff head first. The two remaining on the rock watched his actions with excitement. The guy used the skill of creating everything in flight, creating the aircraft carrier Shinano. This is the name of a Japanese aircraft carrier from World War II. Its creation shook the sea and created huge waves. What they saw amazed the outside observers, that they stood with their mouths open and their eyes wide. Because of its weight, the ship sometimes sank to the bottom along with the waves, stirring up the entire surface of the water. The kraken, which had been sleeping at the bottom of the sea all this time, opened its eyes and woke up. At that moment, the guy was running along the deck of the aircraft carrier, moving somewhere forward. The 256-meter aircraft carrier Shinano is best suited to start this relay race. Then he jumped up and used the skill of creating all things to create Musashi, the second battleship of the Yamato series. It was also a battleship of World War II. Under its weight, it stirred up the water even more. The kraken began to twitch and move towards him at full speed. The boy continued to run forward along the deck of the new ship. He thought that right now the kraken would notice him. Approaching the bow of the ship, where behind it there was only open sea, he jumped into the air again. Finally, in completion, he created the first battleship, Yamato. And again, he ran without stopping further along the deck. Finally, the kraken appeared. Releasing his tentacles from the water, he grabbed the ship's mast with them, squeezing it with great force. It began to creak. Then, with his huge tentacles and body, he wrapped himself around the entire ship. The guy was glad that it finally showed up. It became clear that it really was huge, colossal in size. It could even compare with the largest battleship in history. All this time, such a huge sea monster was nearby, but in Atalaste, there were no rumors or eyewitness accounts about it. And all this is the result of the efforts of Uncle Gallo and his crew. However, for this very reason, he must come up with a plan to tame this monster. If the kraken is like all the monsters in this world, then when it receives critical damage, it will simply disappear. In that case, Gallo and his crew would not be able to prove the real reason why they blocked the exit to the sea. And he kept thinking about how to defeat the monster while leaving proof of its existence. And he came up with a solution. He created a submarine and directed it towards the monster. The kraken, whose tentacles instantly disappeared, the ship was lost. Seeing a submarine in front of him, he directed his tentacles towards it. As the hero had expected, having lost his target, he reflexively turned in the direction he had thought. He aimed at the kraken's head. It was perfect. It was perfect. The guy pressed a button, and light started coming out of the submarine's gun. He had launched the beam. From the tentacles that it was reaching towards him to its entire body, the kraken was instantly frozen. And no matter how he tried to move, he couldn't do anything. All he could hear was the quiet crunch of ice. The hero cried out triumphantly that one giant frozen cuttlefish was ready. Everyone was happy with the victory. He had seen it in an old special effects movie, a mysterious beam that froze a giant monster in an instant. Maybe it had some other use there, but now it came in handy. At this time in the City Guild, those three men who had recently joked about the hero were indignant, sitting in the tavern. They were very bored. It was impossible to even find a worthy opponent there, and they didn't really like the tavern. The familiar worker was thinking that opening a bar on the side of the guild was a bad idea. It looks like they'll have to close it after all. He turned to the side. Some sounds were coming from there. There was loud talk among the villagers on the street, and everyone sitting in the tavern heard it and came out to look. People were talking about how the object did not move, but whether it was alive. Another villager thought it was a strange joke. The three adventurers opened their mouths. They immediately understood what they were seeing. Someone asked if this was a Z-rank monster, the kraken. What was it doing here? Everyone saw a huge kraken that appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the sea. Do they really mean to say that he lived here all this time? The adventurer with scars on his face remembered that indeed any ships that left this port sank, but everyone thought that they were pirates. Finally, everyone realized the real reason for the shipwreck. Until now, they thought it was because of pirates, but in fact it was the kraken. At this time, on the other bank, the captain was talking to the hero. He asked the guy if he really needed to cross to the other bank, and he answered that he did. And the captain still had a lot of things to do. He needed to explain everything to the city's residents, and also negotiate with the landlord. But he didn't understand what he was talking about. If anyone had a problem, it was Psyche. The captain really wanted to thank him. He really helped them a lot. Thanks to him, they saved Adalast. But he thought it was all Uncle Gallo's fault. He only helped them a little at the very end. The captain said that he had defeated a Z-rank monster. He could have received a huge sum of money from the country as a reward for defeating the monster, and he could have received the title of a hero and become famous. But Takura didn't want that. It was too much of a problem for him somehow. He scratched his head awkwardly after these words. The captain looked at him questioningly. Angie was sad about his departure, but his duties here were over. Now she played her job. He told her to make sure that Gallo and her father successfully mended their relationship. The captain noted that he really was not an ordinary boy. He dealt with the Kraken with the help of some mechanisms, but at the same time, it looked like it was an ordinary thing. He looked more like an uncle. Angie confirmed that she also thought that the hero looked like her grandfather. In times when everything was quiet, he was just having fun, but in difficult times he took bold actions. You could rely on him. People said that he was strange and without breaks. Takura is also weird, so they look similar. With him, the girl feels calm and happy and would like to continue being with him. She decided that in 5 years he would become her fiancé and would be accepted into the Alcuin family. The captain smiled at this. The hero was reminded of how children tell their fathers that they will grow up and marry them. He thanked her, saying that he was glad about it, but he said that their age difference was too big, so it was better for her to abandon this idea so that she could find someone she really loved. But she argued that their age difference was less than 10 years. Her parents had a bigger age difference, and at 50 and 60, even a 10-year difference doesn't matter. She has already calculated and argued with real figures. She knows how to achieve her goals. He still agreed, but on the condition that if she didn't find a person dear to her heart before she came of age, she was glad. He remembered himself as a child. By the time she turns 20, she will have forgotten about him. At that time, the girl had already appointed Uncle Gaul as a witness. Clearing his throat, the man spoke the words of the oath before them, and the Marquise extended her hand for the hero to seal his promise with a kiss. Psyche dropped to one knee and kissed the Marquise's hand, giving his promise. Even though he didn't like it, he had to agree. He had to agree. He couldn't ruin her childhood dreams before she grew up. The child was delighted, and the captain praised the hero. The man decided to tell him that what had just happened was not an ordinary formality. It was a real engagement ceremony, widely accepted among the nobility. The hero was dumbfounded. Although Angie said 5 years, the hero himself decided to wait only until she comes of age, which is in 4 years. So, in 4 years, they will get married. She is incredibly happy about this. He had just learned that they became adults at 14. The captain patted him on the shoulder. It seemed he had a mistaken idea about that, but the captain would be glad to see him become an earl. It seemed he had gotten into a strange story again. They saw him off. He only hoped that in 4 years she would meet many more people. Anything could happen. After all, human feelings are a mysterious thing. In any case, he would put this question off until later and now go straight to Fulton. Takuma Saiki turned 60 this year and has happily retired. Just over 2 months ago, he was summoned to another world. Along with him, the hero Aiki, the sage Kenjin, and the Saint Nine were summoned. They already knew about the other world and magic, so they quickly figured everything out. And he, surrounded by incomprehensible things, was left alone, and all he did was collect problems. There was an attack by the army of the Demon King. He was accused of an attempt on the king's life and declared wanted. He also managed to visit the monster's lair. Perhaps if he had not acquired a new young body, and along with it the skill of creating everything, his second life in another world would have ended long ago. There were no less problems later. In the waters of the port city of Atalasta, a monster of the Z rank, the so-called natural disaster, appeared. As a result, he had to face the Kraken in battle. Together with the former pirate Gallo and his crew, they managed to successfully defeat the monster. But then, due to his own misunderstanding, he got engaged to a girl he thought was a boy. She turned out to be a marchioness, the daughter of a duke. And so, finally, he sails to the city of Faltime, or so he thought. It turned out that to get to Faltima, when they arrived on the shore, they had to cross the great forest, and that was not easy. After all, it was much faster to return to Mizantos and take the ferry to Faltima. He really didn't pay attention to the distance on the map. He thought there were only mountains, but it turns out there was also a forest. In any case, he had nowhere to rush. He had to manage somehow. The headquarters of the Caledonia Adventurers Guild. News has reached them that a man calling himself Takumi has defeated the sea monster, Kraken. They just received a report from the Atalasta Guild. The girl is surprised that the news is not from Mezontos. Did he guess that they deployed their troops in Mezontos? This is a ripe decision. First, he asked for leave to go to Atalast, and now he is going to go through the Great Forest. The assistant asked the master if there was a possibility that Takumi's original target was the Kraken that had appeared in Atalaste. But she didn't think so. Even their guild, with its vast information network, didn't know about the Kraken's appearance. She wondered how the guild's employees even knew that the Kraken had been defeated. An adventurer's card can be used to confirm that a monster has been killed, but Takumi does not have one. Once the monster is defeated, it immediately disappears, as the guild was able to learn of the existence of the Kraken. It turned out that the proof was that a frozen Kraken had surfaced right in the middle of the port. The guild workers were the witnesses. The guild master heard that he had a creation skill, but could he really use it to freeze a huge monster that was bigger than the largest ships in an instant? But such magic itself does not exist. At least not among humans, but races like elves can use such spells. Takumi makes the assistant wonder if he is really human. She didn't understand what he was trying to say. But, in his opinion, he may be a servant of the Demon King. The Demon King, who rules over all shadow creatures. However, there are rumors that his army is in competition with other monsters. And due to the failure of the attack on the royal capital, this struggle should have intensified. This explains everything. The extermination of monsters in the cave, and now the Kraken. Doesn't this give reason to think that the cause of these incidents is the same? All this is the result of the Demon King's army's advances. Perhaps this monster has taken the form of a human and is now exterminating other monsters. Even his fickle plans are most likely just a way to play with them. Although the guildmaster understands that this is too unlikely and seems like nonsense that would never even occur to anyone. However, she was thinking about the same thing, which greatly surprised the assistant. They can't ignore it any longer. They change course. Instead of coercing him into cooperation, they must arrest him. They must find out who Thakura really is as soon as possible. She told the head of the secretariat to entrust this matter to the Shadow and the Swordmaster. He didn't understand if she really wanted to cooperate with these two, but the situation required drastic measures. At the moment, they were the strongest guilds they could turn to. A specialist in stealth assassinations, one who has no equal in pursuit techniques, S-rank adventurer Shadow, and also the strongest swordsman in the guild, SS-rank adventurer Swordmaster. There is currently no one in the guild more capable than the two of them. The head of the secretariat understood the order and will give them the task, assigning it the highest priority. No matter who Takumi is, he is someone their world has never known, and this time she will definitely find out who he is. Royal capital Caledonia. The king was informed that a Kraken had appeared in the vicinity of Adelast. This is nothing but trouble for the king. He ordered not to send an army because they have already incurred large military expenses because of the Demon King. The budget cannot withstand even greater expenses. He came to receive this from the Adventurers Guild, and to pay the reward from the budget of Count Adelast, and not to touch the royal budget. The servant hastened to say that this was not necessary, since the Kraken had already been defeated. And one man did it. The king asked if he was the swordmaster, but he was told that it was Takumi, a man from another world summoned along with the three heroes, the one who was wanted for attempting to assassinate the king. The king decided that this was some kind of mistake and did not believe it. But according to the report, the Adventurers Guild has thrown all their efforts into finding out his location. The report was provided by a reliable source, and it says that Takumi defeated the Kraken. The king asked if he only had the first level, but the servant couldn't know for sure. In truth, none of them had seen his status with their own eyes. After defeating the Demon King's army, Saint Neen said that it was only thanks to Takumi that they were able to achieve victory. However, no one can confirm this either. If he's really that strong, they can't leave it like that. He was a rebel from the start. The king ordered August to use the Raven. It is better to get rid of various small problems at once. Takumi is now heading to Faltum to meet Saint Nene. At first, the king thought he was an ordinary man summoned from another world. But it's entirely possible that someone else is in charge of this. The church, or the guild, whoever gets Takumi will greatly increase their power. So, we need to take action before that happens. He has been wandering through the forest for 2 days. It seems like he is moving forward, but at the same time there is a feeling that he is constantly walking in circles. I wonder if he can really get to Faltima. With nothing but trees around, it's hard to know which direction to go. He was completely lost. Was he really in trouble this time? He had created a compass, but it seems to be useless in this world. I never thought that in another world they don't use a compass. It seems that people here don't even go into this forest. If this continues, he will turn into a skeleton that no one will know about. Perhaps if he could look down on the forest from above, he would know which way he needed to go. He began to lick the tree. And as a child, of course, he often climbed trees, but now everything is different. Although surprisingly, it came very easily to him. He climbed to the very top. There was a very nice view there. There was a mountain range off to the side, which he had seen before entering this sea of green. This meant that he now understood a little which way he needed to go. He looked at it. It was quite windy up there, and the wind was favorable. In the forest, everything looks the same because of the tall trees, and it is much faster to move above the forest. Suddenly, a good idea came to him. He decided to create a paraglider, but it turned out to be quite difficult to control. When you're floating, it feels like the wind is about to take you away, but it's so invigorating. Flying further into the sky, for a second it seemed to him as if he had just flown through something. Because he was distracted, he did not see the tree in front of him at all. Suddenly, a huge tree appeared. He didn't have time to dodge in time, crashing right into it. Breaking many branches under him, he landed on the ground, but it turned out not to hurt at all. The branches and leaves softened the fall like a pillow. And yet, in front of him was an incredibly tall tree. He wondered how many hundreds of years it was. It was hard not to notice something so huge, but how could he not see it then? Someone called him from the side, asking who he was. Turning around, the hero saw that many people had pointed their weapons at him. One of them shot an arrow straight at his feet. The man asked again who he was and for what purpose he had entered these lands. The hero introduced himself as Takumi and said that he was just trying to get through the forest to get to Fulton. The man did not understand whether he really wanted to just go through the forest, and for this purpose he went through the barrier erected here. The hero, hearing about the barrier, was surprised. He really had recently felt something similar. Could it really have been a barrier? Another elf turned to the speaking man, telling Mr. Hadiyet that an ordinary person would not be able to pass through this barrier on their own, and this guy was clearly not simple, but the man already knew this. He turned to the hero again, saying that the elder would decide what to do with him and that he should go with them. But they can't let him harm the elder, so he puts him to sleep. He uses a special spell of Sandman to lure the spirit into dreams, asking him to put him to sleep. The spell is called Cloud of Sleep. The elf ordered the others to take the hero to the elder while he was sleeping. One of the elves called the commander, pointing his finger to the side. It looked like this man was not going to fall asleep. The elf looked away in shock. Did he have resistance to sleep? In that case, he would have to use a stronger spell. He used a spell to plunge him into the abyss of despair, an endless nightmare. The hero didn't understand what was going to happen. They finally realized that sleeping spells didn't work on him at all. In that case, they used another spell from the forest ancestor to make him use his branches to bind. The hero sneezed just once, and the branches broke. The elves were hostile. They thought he was resisting them. So he had come here with evil intent after all. In that case, they had nothing to talk about. Anyone who encroaches on the greatness of this forest will be destroyed. They started shooting arrows at him. They shouted at him to stay put and not run away. But even if they asked him like that, why should he stop? They also used many other spells, such as Air Blade and Ice Spear. Next, they used stone blocks. They thought that he decided to use them in the village as a shield. For them, he was very treacherous. The hero himself did not think that they would attack him so suddenly. It turns out that now he is in even more trouble. Other elves looked out of the windows of the houses, but upon seeing what was happening, they immediately closed them back. They were probably just scared by the invader who had appeared out of nowhere. But doesn't that mean they attacked not out of hostility, but because they were afraid? In that case, if he continued to run, it would only strengthen their fears. The hero braked sharply. He raised his hands up, saying he surrendered. The elves were confused. The captain said to take him into custody and tie him up tightly. They don't know yet what kind of trick he'll decide to use this time. The heroes don't know what will happen next, but at least it's better than being on the run. They arrived at a huge treehouse. He was to meet the chief. The captain advised him to behave appropriately, but his appearance alone was already inappropriate. The elves entered the elder's room, saying that they had brought the one who had invaded their forest. The elder turned out to be a pretty young, beautiful girl. She told him she had been waiting for him for a long time and called him by name. The guy himself was shocked to see the elder. She was already tired of waiting for Mr. Takumi. She welcomed him to the elf village. The guy asked again if he was really in the elven village. It turned out that everything was exactly like that, and this village in which one kind of elves lives. When he recalls the elven race, Naum involuntarily recalls Farin. Indeed, if you think about it, such an atmosphere is being created. Now everything has become more or less clear. All of the elven race, he did not notice it at all. The elder called Kadiet. She told him to remove the ropes from the prisoner, and after that he could be free. The captain wanted to object, but still said that everything would be done. He bowed and asked for forgiveness from Lord Takumi for the rude reception. The elder said that suspicious events have been happening in the village one after another lately. That is why everyone is wary. As the elder, she apologizes for being rude. She introduced herself as Seppu. This is not her real name. Adult elf names are long and difficult for humans to remember and pronounce. But could such a young girl really be an adult elf? It turned out she was over 2,000 years old. Hearing this, the hero was in complete shock. The elder noticed that it seemed he still hadn't gotten used to local reality. No matter whether he was a high-ranking elf or an ancient elf, both could be considered old elves who had lived a little too long. But it turned out that there were people in his hometown who knew. He was just a person who wasn't interested in youth culture. So Mr. Takumi also put a lot of effort into understanding how to behave as a long liver. Takumi thought about it after her words. He didn't seem to say his real age. I wonder why she thought he was a long liver. And by the way, when he came here, he didn't seem to introduce his name, so why does she know it? She knew the approximate situation. She had heard about the royal summoning of heroes from another world, and that age did not match appearance. And she often heard about Mr. Takumi from Yggdrasil. This name seemed unfamiliar to the hero. In fact, he was now there by the will of Yggdrasil. The tree he collided with was Yggdrasil. Did she mean to say that the tree had a will? That was exactly it. Yggdrasil was created personally by a god who had come to this land in the past. She had seen it planted by a god with her own eyes. The guy was surprised if there was a god in this world. As for God, he remembered his status. After all, it says that his profession is God. But he doesn't understand what the profession of God could mean. It seems that Seppu knows a lot about it and he should try to clarify it all with her. The girl shut his mouth with her finger. She knew what he wanted to ask, but perhaps he would find out better on his own. Since Mr. Takumi doesn't know anything, he has no choice but to take her word for it. Instead, doesn't he think it would be better to investigate everything himself? He felt like a child being reproached by adults. Scratching his head, he agreed with her. If you don't explore, you won't learn anything. He will learn new things at his own pace. The girl called Kadiet, and he arrived immediately. She asked the hero to answer the call of Yggdrasil, and the summoned elf will show him their village, where he will stay for a while. Kirill saw that everyone was rebuilding the houses that had been destroyed during the riots. Even the military had to get their houses repaired. At this rate, they would quickly run out of trees in the warehouse. The elf didn't blame anyone in particular, of course, but the plan they had worked so hard to prepare for had gone badly. The hero didn't think it was entirely his fault, but that sharp look the elf was giving him. He asked Kadiet if he could help them with anything. The elder had told him to let him do whatever he wanted, so he should probably agree. The hero approached the huge logs. Everyone looked at him strangely. First, he decided to cut down the trees. A chainsaw would be a bit overkill. And the kids are watching, so he wants to surprise them. He'll try to get by with an object that's familiar to the locals. So he decided to make a sword. He began to swing the weapon with very fast movements. He had to use the katana because of this little thing. He couldn't help but say it. Behind him, all the logs crumbled. Those watching were delighted. They seemed to like it, so he decided to continue. After some time, he had already chopped a lot of logs and was tiredly wiping the sweat from his forehead. He got carried away and chopped all the logs. The elf noticed his recreation skill. It's a very useful skill. But why hadn't he used his skills before? After all, with him, he wouldn't have had to try to escape. That's true. If he hadn't tried to escape, there wouldn't have been such damage. He asked for forgiveness for that. But the elf meant that if he really decided to fight, they would not be able to fight back. It turns out that in the head of this hero, there was not even a thought about fighting. Seki himself was thinking at that moment that he would have to do the work of carrying logs later. In Lalenta, he was used to working as a day laborer. The hero called the elf, asking if it was possible to use magic to move things. But their magic directly borrows the power of spirits and cannot be used for nonsense. Although, when he was chasing Psyche, he used it quite energetically, Well, okay, we need to think about what to do. If all this is transferred, it will take quite a long time. In this case, the skill of creating all sorts of things should be used again. But what should he create? The previous one seemed to go down well with the children, and if we are talking about children, then there is nothing better than one of his ideas. This is what he admired as a child. Strong and cool, and also highly efficient, a superior super robot. He created a super robot. When you control a robot that inspired you as a child, it's very exciting. The hero was in the robot's head to control it from there. He just couldn't figure out how to control it. He pressed a button, and the robot moved a little. But something changed, and the huge robot began to lean to the side. This could not be allowed. If they fell, there would be enormous damage. At least a hand had to be put under them. When he did this, the robot's arm detached and flew away, landing in a place near the elves. The robot itself fell. A lot of sand and dust rose into the air. The hero crawled out of the robot, realizing that he should have ejected earlier. Raising his head up, he saw an elf with a threatening look. His eye was twitching. He was calling Mr. Takumi and was clearly very angry. He was laughing awkwardly, scratching the back of his head. He was clearly very ashamed. As a result, the damage increased several times, and he found himself in a situation where Kadiet is now scolding him. The elf was indignant. Thanks to Takumi, they had wasted a lot of time and materials again. He understood that the hero was just a guest, but he would have liked to see more adequate behavior. The hero admits that he is right and does not dare to deny it. Because the super robot trampled the house into pieces, the damage has increased several times, and the hero himself now works with his own hands with a hammer and nails. Overall, because of this new damage, it took much longer to restore the village. But the children seemed to like it. They asked him to do something else. Since the elf had already shown him the village as the elder had ordered, he asked if the hero would like to know anything else. He asked for time to think. He asked if the villagers were facing any difficulties. He understands the situation that people are in with their destroyed homes, but he thinks the whole situation looks a bit gloomy. He is surprisingly perceptive. Everyone really seems to be in a daze. There really are things that need to be done. That's why everyone is worried about it. The hero asked to tell him what the reason is if there are no restraining moments, and the elf, in general, is not against it. A few years ago, a monster began to appear frequently in this part of the village. It was causing harm to the villagers, so they decided to pacify it. When they came to Yggdrasil to pray, it was not clear what circumstances, but he came again, and the whole idea was cancelled. But soon they will have to move. If his lair is left as is, the forest will be saturated with filth. The hero was surprised by the fact that there was a lair in this forest. It turned out that there had never been such a thing in this forest protected by the forces of Yggdrasil. The villagers began to suspect that Yggdrasil was weakening. It seems that the hero himself had to see this lair in the past. Then it was somehow possible to destroy it. But now, because of this, everyone cannot calm down. Moreover, the new lair that appeared this time is burdensome. The hero asked if his power was great, but the size of the lair itself turned out to be small. It is located at a height above the treetops in the upper layers of the atmosphere. The hero was deeply shocked. It turned out that magic wouldn't reach its target from the ground, and if you use spirit magic in flight, the shot's power wouldn't be enough to destroy the lair. This is indeed problematic. When the hero heard about the lair, he imagined something similar to a cave. If so, he asked to be allowed to help. Everyone welcomed him so warmly in this village. Maybe his skills will be useful here. The elf thought about it. He was grateful for these words. However, this forest was inherited by them from ancient times and is under their sole responsibility. They want to cope with their duties themselves. Takumi became sad. Suddenly, a good idea came to his mind. He called Hadiet, who was already leaving, and asked about his idea. The elf thought it over. As expected of Mr. Takumi, this was an amazingly fearless decision. They couldn't even think of such a thing. Indeed, in that case, they are in charge. They should try. He would need to discuss this with everyone first. There might be some who objected to taking anyone other than the village elf with him. It must be hard for Kadiet to think about everything in detail. In the end, Sibu's gentle voice approved of their idea, and he too became part of the team in the cave cleaning operation. A little later, in the forest, a team of elves and a hero ran quickly through the trees. On the back of each elf were their bows for fighting, as expected from a people who feel great in the forest. Even in a dense forest, they can break through without looking back. Hadiet turned to Takuma, praising him for keeping up with them. The forest was like home to them. They had been used to it since they were children. He could only marvel at how calmly Psyche could keep up with their pace. He himself hadn't thought about it, but it's true. Having come into this world and rejuvenated, it seemed as if his body had become lighter, and he moved more than in his youth. This is because originally it is another world where magic exists, and some changes could have happened in his body. One of the elves noticed something. She turned back and called her commander. Kadiet stood in front of the hero, covering him and asking him to be quiet. Ahead of them were several monsters who were going somewhere. The hero noticed that when the monster passed by the tree, the leaves of that tree dried up in an instant. Could it be that the life of the forest was drained only because the monster was moving? He didn't notice that he had only encountered the monster in the wasteland and the cave before. The monster turns out to be a life-sucking creature. The elves also noticed how they were affecting their sacred forest. The hero looked up and discovered a strange spot in the sky. Other monsters immediately started coming out from there. Monsters appear out of nowhere. It turns out that this place is the lair. It was really high, probably 50 meters. The commander asked Mr. Takumi for permission before proceeding, and he nodded his agreement. Kadiet began to chant a spell, calling upon the holy spirits of their forest. He asked them to grant them, the children of the forest, divine protection. Having finished the spell, he directed a stream of magic at one of the monsters. The commander gave the order to the others to begin the attack as well, and all at once they moved into battle. Some elves shot from the bow behind. Others, accompanied by the hero and the captain, ran forward. The arrows hit the monsters, piercing them. One of the monsters headed towards the guy, but he was covered in time, dealing with the monster. Takumi was notified that a new one had appeared at the bottom of the portal, and he gave the command to the boys to attack. He created a triumphal arch using the skill. It was a huge, tall building. The commander gave the order for a joint attack so that everyone would shoot spirit magic into the lair. The elves did so. The sounds of gunfire were heard from everywhere. The elf cast a spell asking the wild spirit Wind King to use the enormous power inherent in him to point out the one who contradicts him. That tyranny would blow with all its cruelty, prevail and mow down everything. Yes, show the will of the gods in their manifesto. And let the crushing tornado turn everything around into dust. He hit the sky with this spell, and it sparkled so much that you had to close your eyes. Looking at the sky again, everyone saw that it was clean. They were able to do it. By joining forces with Kadiet, they eliminated the lair, triumph of the village. They destroyed the OV's lair. The captain was pleased. But now they need to continue supporting the ground forces and exterminating the monsters. The wounded need to be treated with restorative magic. Someone used the spell of Undine, the water spirit, asking to ease the pain of the wounded, and the elf's hand that was wounded was healed in the next moment. The wounds were healing before his eyes. The hero wonders if this is also spirit magic. He remembered that Farina from the group of maned wolves also used this magic when she was asked to save her from fatigue with restorative magic. Suddenly, a huge arrow struck the arch, causing it to crumble. The elves that were on it began to fall down, along with the debris. The hero and the commander shouted what just happened. Someone from the side answered the commander-in-chief to look forward and pointed a finger at the ground. There stood a huge monster with 2 pairs of arms and big muscles. His head was like a lion's, and his body was like a human's, except for the extra limbs. He was covered in magic. At first he growled, and then he started talking like a man. He sensed that there was something inconspicuous and tried to shoot, and in such a place the elves were hiding. There was a tense atmosphere around. What kind of monster is this? It looks like a monster, but it speaks. It not only has intelligence, but it can also speak. It's unimaginable. The monster noticed that the lair had disappeared. It became clear to him that the projectile had dragged itself out with its last strength. He felt sorry for the effort he had wasted. But if the others were happy for even a second, it was worth it. The hero noticed several elves under the monster's paws. Could it be that they were elves from the ground forces? They can't be dead. The monster saw where the hero was looking and told him to calm down because they were not dead yet. Now he needs to rip out that Yggdrasil he didn't like, and that means he'll have to wait until the interrogation. And even after the interrogation, he won't kill them. Let them feel fear and suffering to their heart's content, and then become living food for the monsters. That's his plan. He asked if the hero knew that to quickly increase the strength of monsters, such high-quality food as elves is needed. With such active food, monsters quickly evolve. After these words, the elves became angry. They moved into battle trying to push his dirty feet off their comrades. But the monster was just waiting for them to move. He called them messengers of the shadow and said that they knew no bounds. He would destroy them in an instant. With the ball of magic in his palm, he could finally attack. Once again, the magic spear transformed in his hand. The surprised elves froze in place, and the monster launched a weapon in their direction. The hero shouted the name of Mr. Kadiet, and a second later, the sound of a powerful blow was heard throughout the area. All the elves nearby flew into the air from him. The monster grinned. It amused him. The bodies of the elves fell to the ground. The hero jumped from the arch to the ground and ran up to the captain, shaking him, asking him to hold on. There is still breathing, but consciousness has already switched off. If this continues, then everyone will die. The monster behind the hero asked who he was. Not an elf, but just a human or something. He was interested in the fact that as soon as he went down, that huge building disappeared. Could this really be his skill? The monster called out to the guy who ignored him and he couldn't stand it, and shouted at him to shut up. The veins on the monster's face bulged with anger. How dare a normal person give him orders? Growling, he asked how he dared to behave like that in front of Zaginius, the general of the devil's army. But the hero only angrily shouted at him again to shut up, because he had no time for him at all right now. This stunned him for a second. Realizing that he had not misheard, he became even angrier. This courage was astounding. Things were different with elves, but there was no point in leaving him alive. He transformed the spear from magic again. He had crossed the line where he could be buried as a human. The spear would be his souvenir in the underworld. Wishing him death, the monster threw the spear at his back. The hero recalled that he seemed to ask to be silent and grabbed the weapon flying at him with one hand. He shouted that he did not understand what he was saying. He threw the spear back at the monster. It didn't even have time to be surprised when the blow happened seconds later. The hero sat among the elves who lay unconscious on the ground. This is exactly the moment when the skill of creating different things would come in handy. He can't think of a suitable thing for healing. He needs the magic of restoration that the guys used. He would use it now, but the chief healer himself can barely breathe. The captain on the ground coughed up blood. The hero just held on to him. Suddenly, an idea came to him. He screamed at the top of his voice, asking the holy spirits to lend him their strength. The elf guys were dying, and he asked for help in saving them with their elven strength. But there was silence all around. The guy was in despair when a ball of warm light appeared from the side. In a moment, there were already many of them around. The spirits woke up, and he looked at what was happening in amazement. The guy watched the miracle unfold with his mouth open. The light told him to hurry as fast as he could. At that moment, there was a big flash of light. The ground under his feet began to crumble and huge vines began to emerge from underneath it, later forming trees. The hero did not understand what was happening because the trees were supposed to wither because of the monsters. The captain who was lying next to him instantly opened his eyes and stood up from the ground. The other elves also followed him and, having woken up, stood up from the ground. A young, beautiful girl appeared in the sky. It was a manifestation of the spirit. It could not be the Queen Creator herself. The spirit girl cast a spell of full restoration, and the trees around her sparkled. They instantly grew to unprecedented sizes, as if they had been there from the very beginning. Everyone watched this with admiration. The hero noticed that the elf boys had healed their wounds, and the forest had also been reborn. This was probably due to the spirit that responded to his cries for help. But he didn't understand what about that monster. He remembered that it seemed to be standing to the side, but now it wasn't there. Just recently, he had only spoken to it, and now it had disappeared. The captain also looked around suspiciously. The hero walked in the very front and saw that the commander constantly looked away from him, as did the other elves. As soon as he looked at someone, they immediately turned their heads away. He didn't understand what kind of atmosphere this was. You would think they would return triumphantly, but everyone looked sad. It's not that they avoided him, but it seems like they see him as a nuisance. He was quite surprised by what had just happened, but the fact that the good spirit had helped so much was due to just his cry for help. Kadiet looks puzzled by something. By the way, that spirit was the Queen Creator, probably a very famous person in the spirit world. In the city, they were already met by other elves, congratulating them on their return. They were happy that everyone had returned safely. Families and friends hugged each other, and the hero watched from the side with a smile. It seems that concern for one's fellow man is common to all races. He turned back and watched the captain leave. Was he really heading towards Cebu? It seems that at such a touching moment, foreigners like him will not be able to integrate into this atmosphere. The hero approached a huge tree, but he originally came to this village after crashing into Yggdrasil. He remembered the elder's words about how she wanted him to meet Yggdrasil, and he really wanted to meet him too. Wants to see him, who has just arrived in this village, but since he got to the tree without incident, you can say hello to him. He placed his gloved hand on the tree bark and spoke the words that he was home. Instantly, an empty field appeared in front of him. He did not understand what had happened. A warm wind blew across the grass in the field. He didn't understand why he was in such a place. The feeling of being in reality has weakened a little, but everything is not as foggy as in a dream. An amazing landscape has opened up before him. There is a strange nostalgia. He felt something wrong behind him and turned around to see a small child calling him father, tugging at his clothes. He looked in shock at the child who continued to call him father. The guy, bending over with a smile, apologized to the child, saying that he was not his father. But he insisted on his own. The hero sighed and picked up the child in his arms and, giving in, said that yes, he was his dad. The child smiled and laughed after these words. He had light hair, although it looks like that because of the sun. And he is definitely not an elf child, because his ears are like a human's. He lifted the child high above the ground. So cute that it even lifted his spirits. He hugged the child, closed his eyes, pressed himself to his chest, and told his dad that they needed to meet next time. After these words, a bright light appeared behind the hero. He turned to look at it. He saw that same huge tree. Why Yggdrasil glows. The elves sitting nearby in a bow explained that it was because it used to be called the Golden Tree. The hero turned to the elves who worshipped him. He asked what was going on, although they may be worshipping Yggdrasil now. The elder who came forward said that he was mistaken. They all kneel before him, Lord Takumi, in admiration and respect. He called out to Cebu, bowed, but he didn't understand why they were doing it. The spirit had saved them all, and he hadn't done anything. And despite this, gratitude and respect would have been too much. Cebu thought about it. It was so like Mr. Takumi, but being too modest wouldn't always look dignified. In any case, more than 1,500 years have passed, and this tree was able to regain its power only thanks to him, Lord Takumi. He did not understand what he had to do with it, but the elder was sure. Therefore, she will thank him for saving the earthlings and the tree. Takumi was very surprised by what was happening. He had many questions. Now, it's night. The elf says that tonight the world tree will regain its true power, even if you follow the customs of the lower world. The guy was surprised. She thinks about how they don't have much time left. After all, now that the world tree has regained its powers, in the next day or two this forest will be completely fenced off. If that happens, Takumi won't be able to leave this forest. The boy did not believe what he heard. The elf would be glad, in fact, if the boys stayed in the village for an indefinite period. She thinks that there is still a lot of land that needs Mr. Takumi. The guy waited for the girl's answer. The elf said that this forest had already become a sacred kingdom thanks to the power of the world tree. She believed that from now on there would be no such distortions in caves. Now the girl is sure that no army can touch them. It seems that the guy is sad to say goodbye to the elves as quickly as it seems at first glance. Suddenly, a glowing branch descends from the tree. The elf holds it in her hands. She hands the branch to the boy and says that he will not get lost in the forest if he carries this branch with him. The boy worries that something might happen if he takes it. The elf says there that nothing terrible will happen because this is a gift from the world tree to the guy. Takumi holds a glowing branch in his hands. He remembers his father at this moment. The elves smile as they see the boy off. Meanwhile, a dark silhouette sits among the ruined buildings, of which only boards remain. He is clearly waiting for something. She knew that she would be noticed. In truth, the shadow prided himself on his secrecy, but now he has lost confidence in that secrecy. He wonders if he should say something like that about the holy sword. The swordsman thinks that the shadow has had enough of the unnecessary chatter. He asks the master with a smile not to be so nervous. In response, he asks her with interest how it went. Shadow explains that they finally found what they needed. They waited a long time for this, and finally, it seems that their target has left the great forest. This forest is supposed to be uninhabited, so the shadow doesn't know what Takumi was doing there. Life in the forest can be quite attractive, in the Shadow's opinion. The girl thinks that it is quite possible. Shadow thinks that the swordsman is having a good time. The girl wonders why the Shadow thought that. Shadow explains that she is just seeing it. After all, the girl is so excited that Shadow can feel it. He notices that she looks like she's having fun. The girl agrees. Shadow continues and talks about their goal. And the fact that Takumi attracted so much attention and that he suddenly appeared out of nowhere makes one think about one fact. It is quite possible that he is the same as the girl. Shadow doesn't see anything wrong with this and believes that he and the girl have ended their collaboration as originally planned. The guild told the Shadow to work with the girl to achieve the result. In the end, he was not invited to be a partner until the very end. The girl agrees. Shadow is looking forward to it. He has been receiving many uninteresting requests lately, and he is tired of trying to destroy the demon stronghold. Now he can have some fun, no matter how strange it may be. In any case, their target is a human. Shadow suggests that the guy might be some kind of demon. The girl, on the other hand, thinks that the guy is definitely human. Shadow wonders. He thinks that the girl is relying on intuition or skill. However, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter to them. Shadow curiously asks the girl if she knows that Takumi has amazing incapacitation skills. Shadow thinks that it is some ancient relic for good luck. Now he thinks that the swordsman should be put to rest. The swordsman asked the Shadow to wait. The Shadow suggested that the swordsman might tell him that he should not sneak. Many holy swords do not have detection skills. Shadow thought that it was also a personal quality to know where another person was. The swordsman did not dispute this, but he felt the aura of murder. Shadow asks with a smirk and interest if it's really that obvious. Shadow finds it very cool. He respects the swordsman's instincts and sensitivity, even though it should be completely hidden. The Shadow had just come face to face with the famous SS-ranked sword saint in a perfect situation. He was thinking that he would be lucky enough to be able to hit him. And then, the Shadow rushed towards the swordsman, attacking him non-stop. However, the swordsman stood motionless. The Shadow realized that his attacks were not good enough, and it was better for him to give in. The swordsman asked the Shadow to return to him and leave him alone. At this point, the swordsman's hand shot up, and the place where the Shadow had been was instantly cut in half. The debris was crushed under the swordsman's feet again. Now, it was time for him to go. Takumi looks at the branch. Now he understands everything. It seems that the glow of the Tree of Life branch becomes stronger if you point it in the direction in which the boy needs to move. With such a thing, the guy will be able to move in the big forest without fear of getting lost. Now he will be able to reach the city of Fatima in no time. At least, that's what he thought, until something happened. It turned out that today, only people with the given numbers were allowed on the next cart to Fatima. Many residents were unhappy that their numbers were not on the list once again, wondering how long they would have to wait until they could hit the road. Madiska, where the guy is now, is located in close proximity to the sacred capital of Fatima. For those who are going to visit the sacred capital, it is necessary to arrive here to take the carriage going to the city. This all happens because of the strict control of all those entering and leaving the holy capital. In order to get there, it was necessary to come through nearby cities, like Madiska. The carriage went 3 times a day and could hold about 20 people. The cities were overcrowded with people waiting for their turn. Takumi himself had been stuck here for 3 days already. Even if you know the way, problems may arise along the way, so there is nothing you can do about it. Every day, passengers in the carriage are announced at the square, but it seems that they are not chosen in the order of the queue, but by lottery. In fact, some of those standing right in front of Takumi managed to sit down that same day. He recalls a man who paid for a cart at the cash register. Afterwards, he offered the man behind the cash register a handful of coins, saying it was for a donation. The man folded his hands and blessed the man. Now the boy had guessed everything. He believed that Fatima was a religious city, which meant that in nearby Madiska, almsgiving was common practice. The boy wanted to make a donation too. He put only 1 silver coin on the table. It seemed to him that the size of the donation did not play a key role. The man was not inspired by such a sum, and, with a dissatisfied face, nevertheless blessed the boy, like the others. Takumi understands that in any case, rushing wouldn't change anything, so he waited patiently in the city hotel room. The room was quite simple. The guy thinks that he should go see the city since he has the whole day free now. Takumi excitedly walked out into the city. He was greeted by crowds of people and tall buildings. He noticed that the city was a little more lively because of the people waiting for the carriage. Suddenly, the guy feels like something hit him in the back of the head. and then people in robes touch him on the shoulder. The people in the robes turned around and seemed surprised, then quickly ran away. Takumi didn't understand anything and wondered what could have happened. The men in robes gathered around the corner. They didn't understand what this could mean. They were sure that the dart had hit the guy. It was coated with deadly poison. Even a small scratch would have sent an ordinary person to the next world. One of the men was indignant, because the other weapons also did not work. The second guessed how strong the boy's nullifying ability was. The third man was unhappy that they, the crows, could not deal with such a scumbag. He thought it hurt their pride. Here, the man with the bandages thinks that, after all, he was wrong to consider it excessive, that the king personally gave the order to get rid of this feeble subhuman, whose face is not burdened by any worries. The man realizes that they seem to have underestimated him. He orders the others not to make any more mistakes and to do it right. An incomprehensible silhouette sitting on the roof was watching the ravens. As it turned out, it was a shadow. He is now completely sure that the Kaldazan ravens are also in the game. However, the shadow cannot guess why the men needed to deal with Takumi. Shadow says that it sounds pretty good that the guy has a nullifying skill from an ancient relic. Suddenly, the shadow feels a terrible pain in the shoulder area. It seemed to him that he had completely healed the wound with a restorative item. Suddenly, the shadow understands that the swordmaster called himself by this name for a reason. But the shadow doesn't pay much attention to this. He promises to fulfill the guild's request alone in exchange. However, first he intends to take care of his own goal. A guy is walking through the city. He remembers that there should be a drinking street nearby. He notices that the city becomes lively at night, but calm during the day. Suddenly, the guy hears a scream behind him. As it turns out, the girl was asking the men to stop chasing her. They were very angry and thought that the girl should not be given any leniency. She called for help, and when she saw Takumi walking nearby, she threw herself on his shoulders. The men approached the boy and treated him roughly, but they immediately recognized a familiar face. Takumi didn't know what to do, so he decided to say with a smile that there was no need to start a fight. Instead, he suggested that everyone calm down and try to just talk. The men refused. They decided not to make a fuss and just leave it at that. They ran and said they would remind the girl about it. The guy exhales and is glad that the worst is over. The girl grabs his hands. She sincerely thanks the guy for his help. She explains that these men followed her and she didn't know what to do. As it turned out, the girl's name was Ilsa. The guy told her his name. He said that he was glad that the girl was okay. They stayed by the fountain. The guy found out that Ilsa worked as a waitress in a bar. The girl agrees. She says that she thought it was a good job, where she could earn a little extra money to pay for her priest's medicine in his homeland. However, there were a lot of pushy men in the bar. Takumi expresses his understanding and suggests that it is not easy for a young lady like Ilsa to work alone. The girl agrees. She explains that in a town like this, where there are so many travelers, the locals are indifferent even to other locals if they don't know each other. That's why the girl was so happy when she was helped. The guy is happy that he was able to help Ilse. Then the girl is a little embarrassed and suggests that the guy thank him. He refuses gratitude because he believes that he did nothing wrong. The girl objects. She says that if she doesn't thank the guy, she won't be able to calm her feelings. Although she doesn't really know how to do anything, she asks to at least treat her to some home-cooked food. The boy thought about it when he heard about hand-cooked food. Come to think of it, Takumi hadn't eaten home-cooked food since the time of Adarst. In the elven village, he was fed generously, but the entire diet of elves consists mainly of vegetables, berries, and nuts. The girl was already leaving, but she told the guy that she would drop by his hotel. Takumi was surprised that the girl left before he could answer. On the other hand, abruptly refusing when the person has good intentions is also not very polite. The guy is going to accept this gratitude. He gets up and walks further and further away from the fountain. Meanwhile, the crows learned that the guy was staying at the hotel. Then 2 more men came and asked for forgiveness from the leader. They reported that they had lost the girl they were following. He was annoyed that the 2 of them couldn't keep an eye on the girl. However, the crows dispelled their suspicions about her with a skill. Now they need to focus on Takumi. The crows are going to kill the guy when he falls asleep in his room. They know it won't be easy because their pride is on the line, so this time they have to get him. The girl comes into the hotel. She calls out to the guy and brings a bag of groceries, puts it on the table. Ilsa came to prepare the groceries but noticed that the guy was already asleep. The girl is a little embarrassed. She takes off her clothes. Ilsa says that she was incredibly happy that this happened today. She is ready if she can please the guy. She stands in front of the bed, but as soon as her hand touches the bed, she notices that there is no one here. The girl holds the blade in her hand and realizes that Takumi is not here. As it turned out, Takumi was already riding in the carriage. Even the driver himself noted that Takumi was a pretty lucky guy. The driver tells the guy that the passenger who was supposed to sit in Takumi's seat suddenly got a pain in his lower back. The next one was automatically selected for Takumi. You don't see that every day in the city. The guy says that he himself was surprised when he saw an ad with his number in the hotel lobby. The driver explains that in emergency cases, they book rooms in city hotels. He thinks that if you spend the whole day outside, you would never know about such a sudden situation. The driver thinks that fate is in Takumi's favor. He assumes that the boy has some lucky charm he found somewhere on his journey. Takumi smiles. Who knows? Maybe the Tree of Life branch is leading him to good luck. The boy realizes that he was rude to Ilsa, but he left her a message on the inn counter. He thinks that everything will be fine, and now he needs to go to the sacred capital of Fatima. Meanwhile, Ilsa's blade, without a twinge of conscience, penetrated each of the bodies that the girl tried to resist. Red liquid flowed down her leg. She dealt mercilessly with each of the Raven members. Ilsa is annoyed. After all, if she hadn't been injured by this ballmaster, she would have dealt with these worthless crows in a jiffy. She hates Takumi because he really is lucky. His name is Takumi Saiko. About 2.5 months have passed since he was summoned to another world. He is a god by profession, level 1. Without understanding anything, he was pulled into this world. During this time, he was already falsely accused of attempting to assassinate the king, and the capitals began to be persecuted. He believes that anything can happen in life, and, using the ability to create everything that exists given to him in this world, he managed to have a pretty good time here. At the same time, a saint named Nene was called upon with him, thanks to whom the boy was removed from the wanted list. So he went to the sacred capital of Fortim to thank her. After a pleasant meeting with the guys from the Blue Wolf's Mane, with Anzi from Adarast, Sep, Hadiet, and the rest from the Elven village, he finally arrived at the sacred capital of Fartim. The guy was amazed by the view that was already opening up from the carriage. Not only he, but all the passengers looked at the city with delight. The guy imagined something like a Buddhist temple that stands on the top of a mountain. After all, this building is called the main temple of the Sacred Order, or, as it is more often called, the church. But as it turned out, this task was more like a separate city. All passengers were grateful for this increase. Now Takumi understands that he was not the only one touched by this view. However, even though there is magic in this world, there is no heavy machinery equipment. The guy imagines how much effort and expense it would take to create just this temple. The guy is once again amazed by human strength and faith. A friend appeared in front of Takumi. He was asked to approve an incomprehensible number. He remembers that something similar came up a long time ago. To be honest, the guy has no idea what exactly he needs to approve, but it doesn't seem like it's something important. He decides to agree. The cart passes by buildings where people live. The people live in poverty, and it is clear that they lack the resources to live comfortably. Takumi guesses that this could be an underground city or some kind of settlement. After all, it is a very strong contrast to the grand fortified city. He understands that people here seem to be crowded together, but it all looks different than in Mediska. The passengers understand that it looks unnatural. Suddenly, Takumi notices another group of people. He furiously asks the driver to stop right there. He runs as fast as he can towards this group. He only caught a glimpse, but he is sure that he has found the one he was looking for. The girl stood among the people. She was beautiful among them. She immediately recognized the guy. Takumi was glad to see that this was the one he was looking for. He apologizes to Nene for interrupting him, but the girl says that she was just about to return to the castle. The guy couldn't even imagine. The girl guesses that he is talking about the outfit. She had a religious scarf on her head and a cloth robe on her body. Nene explained that since arriving, these clothes have been like a uniform for her, so she has gotten used to them. However, she is a little embarrassed when she shows up in such an outfit in. The guy finds this a bit impolite. He says that the clothes suit the girl very well. The boy thinks that the last time he saw the girl was right in the middle of the battle with the Demon King's army, so the girl's face was worried. However, now she looks serene. Takumi guesses that the girl is doing well, and that is the most important thing for him. Suddenly, the guy realizes that he was so carried away by this meeting that he completely forgot about the main thing. He suddenly distracts the girl. He bows and thanks Nene. He reminds her that she saved him when he was put on the wanted list. At this point, the girl is embarrassed by this sight. She waves her hands and asks the guy to raise his head. However, the guy can't afford it. He believes that manners should be present among close friends, especially when it comes to a situation where failure could cost him his life. The girl screams that she understood everything. She accepted Takumi's gratitude and asked him to stop. The guy thanks the girl. He says that she really saved him. With these words, he really embarrassed Nene. She thinks that the extreme manners are in the guy's spirit. She is pleased to see that he has not changed at all. However, Nene remembers that it is she who should thank Takumi. After all, he saved her life in that battle. She is standing here now thanks to the boy. Naturally, she will object to the king. Takumi objects and recalls that this is the reason why the girl was moved from the capital to the church. He believes that she sacrificed herself. The girl laughs. She thinks that Jan told the guy about it. He is definitely exaggerating. In the end, the girl herself wanted to be away from the capital. She remembers the king's character and how she has no desire to be near such a person. Nene is grateful to the guy for helping her find an excuse to get away from the capital. Takumi understands that few people want to conflict with the state authorities. The girl asks with interest why the guy came to Fardama and suggests that he wants to convert to religion. The guy refused. He explained that he came to thank the girl. Nene was surprised. She could barely hold back her laughter, but she couldn't. She was sure that the guy hadn't changed at all. She sincerely thanks Takumi for coming. She believes that the guy is not limited in time and can walk around the city with her. Takumi finds this offer very tempting. He says that he was terribly interested in the city when he looked at it from the strip. The girl has made up her mind. She believes that they don't need to hurry since the guy has come such a long way on purpose. Nene stretched. She explained that she was always forced to be here with someone else. However, with the guy's arrival, she felt much freer. Takumi understood that she was talking about the duties of a saint. The girl agrees. She says that she volunteered for this job, so now she can't afford to behave inappropriately. Takumi understands. The girl says that it's very difficult to constantly watch your manners. Nene asks what Takumi did after that. The guy explains that, of course, there were short months, but nothing particularly serious, so you could say that everyday life was calm and serene. Takumi tells her that he has made a lot of new acquaintances, and they are all wonderful people. The girl is surprised because she thinks the world is quite restless at the moment. Nene suggested that it might be because of the guy's nature. She thinks that she should follow his example. Takumi objects. He thinks that the girl's character is much better than his. The girl smiles sadly and says that despite the fact that this world is different, there are still a lot of interesting things happening here. Here they approach the guards, who immediately line up and greet Nene. The girl, as the saint believes, thanks the people for their service. She introduces Takumi as her friend. She asks the guards with interest if they mind if the guy goes with her. The guards agree. The girl winked sweetly at Takumi, indicating that he could now go with her. Now it seemed that the boy understood what role Nene had to play as a saint. When they entered the gate, the girl happily showed the guy the world-famous main temple of the church in the city of Fartim. The tour guide, a girl, says that to the left of the guy he can see a sacred tower which represents this city. The tower that towers over the other buildings looks even more beautiful up close. Takumi had not heard that the tower itself was built by previous generations. Its tip is simply a magnificent detail. The girl explained that 2,000 years ago, the Lord himself descended upon these lands and created the good bells that are still installed in this tower to this day. The boy is amazed at how long ago it was. The mere realization of the existence of something so ancient amazes him. Takumi thinks that there is a certain romance to it. The girl explains that although these bells are a symbol of the church, at the same time there are still legends about their holiness, saying that they will exalt the divine coming. And suddenly the bells from the tower start ringing. The guy smiles and realizes that they came at the right time, just at the moment when they started ringing. Nene is amazed. She hears the bells ringing for the first time. The girl told the truth that they had not rung for 2,000 years, and then all the parishioners were stunned by this ringing. Takumi suggests that today may be the only happy day in all this time, and he and the girl have received a blessing. Nene laughs and thinks that the guy seems to be right. The ringing stops. Nene walks among people. They see her as a saint and believe that the soul can brighten just from one look at the image of the girl. The men bow to her and thank her for her existence. Suddenly, one of the residents notices Takumi, who is following the saint. The parishioners became worried, because the guy did not look like them at all, and he could not be called an outsider either. A parishioner noticed that compared to the holy maiden, Takumi looked like a poor man. The boy notices sideways glances at himself and realizes that he's being looked at sideways. Takumi thinks that perhaps it is natural for some doubts to arise when seeing an unbeliever like him walking side by side with a saint. The girl asks the guy for forgiveness because of her, the guy ended up in the center of everyone's attention. She understands that this is, of course, to be expected, since this is the main temple of the church. The mere mention of the saint is enough to attract the attention of those around her. In fact, Takumi wouldn't even say that it's not because the woman is a saint. He thinks that it's because the girl's very appearance in this city attracts everyone's attention with her brilliance. The girl is embarrassed and understands that the guy has not changed at all during this time. She thanks him for the compliment because she is pleased to hear these words. Now the girl has already gotten used to it, but at first every day was exciting. She simply fell down exhausted when she returned to her room. Takumi can roughly imagine the diligence with which she worked on it all this time. She definitely tried hard. The guy realizes that they have entered a regular street. The girl agrees and says that this is a residential area. Nene explains that the people living in Fartim, with a few exceptions, are almost all believers or are somehow connected to the church. The girl finds this astonishing. Takumi finds it surprising that in such a large city, everyone is connected to religion. Now Nene is going to show the guy the central area where the main church institutions are concentrated. They approach the gate. There was a huge queue at the gate. People were subjected to careful control at the entrance and exit. Believers had to stand in huge queues. The guy understands that thanks to Nene he has privileges. The guy even feels awkward in front of others. The girl understands. She herself became a saint completely by accident, having been called into this world. However, seeing the sincerity on the faces of believers, she feels her responsibility. She is going to show the guy the tour again. They walk through the huge halls and look at the different exhibits. Takumi finds all the structures simply superb. Nene finds it amazing that all these buildings have something in common with those in her past life. The guy believes that it is possible to be present in all other worlds. She thinks it's worth taking the guy to an unusual place, which is different from what he saw before. They walk along a wide street among large buildings again. Takumi was confused about the position the Holy Maiden occupies in the church. Nene thought that if we were to draw an analogy with a regular company, the high priest would be the CEO, and the Holy Maiden would be something like his consultant. And so in this world, there are no hierarchical relationships based on position. Their relationships are more horizontal. The girl's status is no different from the CEO's. Takumi realizes that Nene is not a failure. Then the girl holds the curtains and says that in the next place you need to be very quiet. The girl spoke about the hall in which 3 believers were sitting. The man folded his hands into a fist in front of his face and sat in complete silence. Takumi, seeing this, realized that the man was praying earnestly. He wonders what exactly they could be praying for. The girl explains that this ritual is called the ritual of taking an oath. The girl asks with interest if the guy has ever heard of sacred magic. Hearing this, Nene decided to show the boy sacred magic. The girl began to cast a spell, and a sacred light appeared on her hands. She extends her hands forward a little with the magic sphere and says that this is a simple example of what sacred magic looks like. Takumi realizes that he has seen something like this before. After all, one elf used something similar. Nene realizes that it is quite possible. The method and names may differ, but the effect is essentially the same. Spiritual magic is mostly found among elves and demi-humans, while sacred magic is more common among priests who serve the gods. The difference, of course, is only in the form of regulation, but sacred magic is not called a spell, but a prayer. Now the guy understood everything. Just as in spiritual magic, power is borrowed from the spirit with whom a contract is made. Sacred magic is based on an oath given to the revered deity. In short, in this oath-taking ritual, the believer pledges his sincere allegiance and asks for strength from the revered god. They are now observing the ceremony of establishing a pact with the deity. Nene was originally a saint, so she did not perform such rituals. The girl believes that the deity can answer Takumi. Here, the girl suddenly attracts the guy's attention and says that the culmination of the ritual will soon come. Takumi noticed how the man was praying with concentration. In the silence alone, there was an amazing concentration. Even from just watching, this incredible strength was transmitted to the boy. Suddenly, a board appears in front of the guy. He gets excited because this thing appeared at the wrong time, as always happens. Nine wonders what happened so suddenly. Takumi makes excuses because an incomprehensible sign appeared in front of him again. He is about to approve a request that is incomprehensible to him. Here, the man who had been praying so intently threw up his hands and exclaimed that the Lord had finally graced him with his voice. Nene is very happy that the parishioner succeeded. Apparently, the man is very proud that, in addition to his oath to the Lord, he also managed to receive Nine's blessing. Takumi was very upset that he would not be able to share all his impressions with the guys. Nine explains that after a person makes an oath to God, he will be able to use sacred magic. It seems that unless some good deed is done, the ritual will not be performed. So the maiden feels a little ashamed in front of others, but she can use this magic from the very beginning. Nene confessed that she would like to meet the real God once. However, she immediately notices Takumi's sad appearance and asks him with interest what happened. The guy explains that the panel that offered to choose one thing and had the answers yes and no appeared again at the most inopportune moment. Nene was surprised that some panel was floating out of the guy's hand. Takumi asked with interest if the girl didn't have one, because he thought that the other summoned had one too. Nene says that she has never had a panel, as far as she can remember, but she doesn't know about Eika and Kenjin. The girl wonders what will happen after choosing one of the options. The guy throws up his hands and says that if he clicks yes, then she will immediately disappear, and it doesn't look like anything happens after that. Nene wonders what will happen if Takumi answers no. The guy says that he has never chosen such an answer. After all, he does not know what exactly he approves of. That's why he always clicked only yes. The girl was worried because she considered it quite dangerous, because the guy does not know that he approves. She says that if she were in the guy's place, she would only press the answer no out of fear. The guy thought about me. The computer always asks yes or no if any update or installation pops up. Takumi thought that for now he would click yes to all the panel's requests. Nini realizes that if you look at the status bar, it certainly looks like something like that. But then the girl suddenly asks the guy to hurry up a little if he doesn't mind. Here they ran. After a while, they did not slow down as soon as the priest saw them. They bowed obediently and ran on as soon as they disappeared from their sight. Takumi guessed that the reason for their escape from the pawn was the duties of the holy maiden Nene. The guy seemed to apologize to the girl for taking up so much of her time. The girl laughed and asked the guy not to worry because she wanted to give him a tour. However, the girl asked him to do her a favor. She asked him to keep it a secret because she can't appear in front of everyone in a hurry. The guy promises not to tell anyone about it. Here, Nani and Takumi appear in front of a large door. The girl takes a breath and, with a confident face, prepares to go out. The girl says that this event will take about an hour. The girl wonders if it will be difficult for the guy to wait for this time. Takumi smiles and says that he can wait without any problems. The girl apologizes and closes the door behind her. Takumi goes outside. He is now wondering what he can do. Nene is currently performing her duties as the holy maiden again. Takumi watches this from the window and understands how sacred magic is used on believers. Then Nene suddenly noticed one standing outside and watching them from the window. The girl smiled softly. Takumi waved his hand and thought that he shouldn't be disturbed. The guy walked away and suddenly noticed a large, beautiful fresco. It impressed him greatly. However, a dark silhouette appeared behind the guy. Takumi helps that if the fresco is a church, then the main figure should be God. It seems that people are protected from something incomprehensible, similar to monsters. The voice behind the boy says that the Lord came down to earth in another world and saved his children from flies with the power of his great and deep mercy. It turned out to be a prologue to the scripture from chapter 3. A priest approached the boy. Takumi didn't know who approached him. The man, without explaining anything, continued. He says that all-leading and almighty God saved the human mouth, which was on the verge of extinction. Firewood gave him a new force, called abilities. The man spreads his arms out to the sides and says with a smile that the reason why even a physically weak person is able to live like this is the boundless mercy of the Lord. Their gratitude to the Lord should never be forgotten. The guy laughed a little. Then he heard his name. Nene had already returned for him. She no longer knew where to look for him. The guy apologized and admitted that he was wandering around the street. Suddenly, the girl was surprised. As it turned out, the high priest was standing next to the guy. Nene immediately bowed and offered her deepest apologies for her inappropriate appearance. Here, Takumi pointed his finger at the high priest and connected it with the fact that this was the CEO. The holy servant did not fully understand the meaning of the spoken word. Nene immediately closed the guy's mouth and asked for their forgiveness, immediately leaving. Takumi guesses that the high priest is the first person from the church. The three of them go together. The high priest realizes that the guy is an acquaintance of the Holy Virgin. Takumi agrees and apologizes for not telling his name earlier. The priest seems to understand everything. Takumi says that since such a case has arisen, he would like to thank him for his efforts in unraveling the story related to his search. The priest interrupted the boy's speech with his hand. He wants, or what, for the boy to satisfy the request of the Holy Virgin. He says that the boy has no reason to thank him. Takumi realized that as soon as the high priest found out who he was, he immediately became so caustic. Despite the boy's innocence, an attempt on the king's life was still an attempt. The priest asks to know why an outsider like Takumi is doing this. As far as the priests know, the area is closed to non-believers. He believes that the boy intends to join a religious community. At this point, Nene became agitated. She sincerely asks for forgiveness and says that this person, meaning Takumi, got here solely by her will, and she is responsible for everything. Here, the high priest says that it would be sheer absurdity to lay wine on the Holy Virgin. What the Holy Virgin says is unquestionable. The high priest says that if it is the will of the Holy Virgin, then he approves of this man's presence here. The man immediately broke into a smile. Here, the girl bowed and sincerely thanked the high priest. He said with a smile that this was not worth doing at all. Here, Takumi decided to apologize for all the trouble he had caused. However, the difference in attitude is relatively on Nene and is almost as big as the difference in temperature in the desert during the day and at night. So he understands that he will certainly survive this, but it is better not to spoil his reputation on Nene. The guy said that the priests have a wonderful structure. He thinks that it is the fruit of divine influence. The high priest says that God is great. These fruits are certainly far from his greatness, but he has bestowed great mercy upon the people. Takumi understands that this is not bad at all. He asks with interest how they call their Lord here. The high priest frowned and said that the Lord had no worldly name. The only proper way to address the great Lord was Lord. Here the boy began to realize that he seemed to be gradually irritating those around him. He says that in this case, it will not be easy to distinguish him from other gods. Here the high priest got angry and said that besides the revered name, there are no other gods, there is only one God. In other countries, perhaps, there are those who call themselves gods, but they only pretend to be gods. The first priest thinks it is very wrong that these impostors are put on the same level as the true God. Takumi understands that things are going in the wrong direction. This way he will definitely dig himself a hole. Here the maiden reproached the guy, and again she began to ask forgiveness from the high priest for him. Nene explained that the guy arrived in this world at the same time as her and had not yet fully settled in. She was very sorry that she and the guy had spoiled the high priest's mood. The priest immediately smiled. He relaxed his facial muscles and asked to stop apologizing. He says that a person, accompanied by the Holy Virgin, should not bow his head. He does not believe such mockery and does not take it seriously. Takumi doesn't understand everything, of course, but he thinks it was a bit rude. Suddenly, the high priest turns to the holy maiden. He says that the guards told him that Nene is still going out of the gate. Nene asked with a sad look if she shouldn't have done it. Then the priest smiled and said that it was the other way around. Those around were touched beyond measure by the compassion of the Holy Virgin even to such unfortunate people. However, the priest believes it would be right if the Holy Virgin were to feel similar sympathy for the believers. He asks the girl to take care of herself. Nene lowers her head and says that she will try. The high priest leaves. Takumi asks the girl for forgiveness. After all, if he had not said too much, the man would not have questioned them like that. He thinks that he caused a lot of trouble. The guy looks at the girl. Nene suddenly apologizes. The girl asks Takumi not to worry. After all, the high priest is a man of very deep faith, so the topic of God and religion is very delicate for him. Takumi did not notice that the sacred maiden looked a little upset. Nene immediately looked down. She asks the boy with interest what he thinks about the human colony outside. Takumi said that, in comparison to the elegant city at whose foot it is located, it looks very poor. He would say that there is a deficit of people, buildings, but above all, life force. Nene explains that this colony was created by order of the high priest. All orphans, refugees, and other people without relatives are gathered there. Those who have gone bankrupt and lost their livelihood, this is the place where they are given blood and food. Takumi finds this truly excellent. However, he does not understand why it was necessary to organize a colony outside the city. After all, there is enough space for people in the living quarters. Nene explains that a decision was made that only believers could live in the city. Takumi doesn't understand why, in that case, it is impossible to become a believer in order to officially exist. The girl explains that in order to officially become a believer, one must pay a fee, which costs about 10 gold. The guy was surprised. He calculated it, and it was approximately 100,000 yen. This is quite a decent amount. The guy understands that in order to get a residence permit, he first needs to save up money by working in the city. Nene explains that work for non-believers in the city is prohibited. The guy finds it strange again. After all, to get out of the colony, you need to become a believer. And to become a believer, you need to pay 10 gold, but only believers are allowed to work. She looked down. She asked if the guy would stay for a while, if she prepared a room for him in the church. She said that she wanted to go to a place with the guy. Sometime later in the colony, people are sitting near buildings that can hardly even be called residential. Suddenly, one of the passing boys notices that the Holy Virgin has come to visit them. The Holy Maiden was happy to see the children and all the inhabitants. She served them, and Takumi helped feed the people. The girl asks the guy with interest what he thinks about their way of life. Nene thinks that Takumi felt sorry for these people, and it was sad for him to see it. Takumi agrees and thinks that's how he felt. Nene asks with interest if the guy was glad inside that he didn't live like that. The guy thought about it and says that he didn't go that far. She says that she, in turn, thought about it. She thought about what would have happened if she had been called into this world not to the helm of the Holy Virgin, about how she could have lived the same way if she had been thrown out of the castle for her helplessness. Nene thinks she is lucky to be a Holy Virgin, that God favors her. She only found out about it later, but it seems that this colony was prepared specifically for her to think so. Takumi guesses that all these believers are here only so that Nene can feel superior by looking at them. The guy understands that she absolutely did not care about the will and even the lives of the people living in the colony, and the initiators of all this are the very top of the church. Once Nina realized this, she began to go there regularly, trying to somehow make amends for her guilt, but this time the church used it as propaganda, claiming that the Virgin had become filled with compassion for the common people. Nene lowered her head and jokingly said to herself that she had been spoiled, called a Holy Virgin, and she had fallen for it. Takumi realizes that despite the fact that the girl was included in this huge organization called the Church, due to her role as a saint, she still began to try to change the current state of things. All this time, the girl was trying her best on her own. The guy clenched his fist. He decided to say that Nene was simply magnificent. The girl was surprised, because she did not expect to hear this. But suddenly, her eyebrows drew together, and tears appeared in her eyes. She wiped them away with her sleeve. The girl finally raised her head and, waving her hand, thanked the guy. She gave vent to her feelings. Now it seems to her that, having seen the guy, she relaxed a little. Now she is fine. She tells the guy that she, too, is not going to be satisfied with the current state of affairs forever. She is going to gradually change everything from the inside. Nene is completely serious, and the guy is sure that she will succeed. Takumi is confident that she will definitely succeed. Nene waves goodbye to the guy. The guy understands that his opponent is that high priest. However, it doesn't seem like this is a simple problem that can be solved by simply overthrowing someone. Perhaps it's worth gathering some more information to try to figure out where the threads of this tangled story lead. The guy goes further and further. He is going to look for information, but there is no point in just walking around the city. Suddenly, someone finds him, and the guy turns around at the voice. It turned out to be the guys from the Blue Wolf's Mane. The guy is surprised by this meeting, because they haven't seen each other for a long time. Rain threw her fists at the guy. She couldn't understand how Takumi could be so calm. She was saying that the guy didn't even know what they had suffered because of him. Suddenly, a guy from the group, Carlet, rushes to hug the guy. He is happy that they finally met. Here, the third member of the team says that Rain and Carlet are not like themselves at all, and asks them to calm down. Suddenly, the girl casts a spell, Cloud of Sleep. and immediately Rain and Carlet fell into a deep sleep for a couple of moments. Faralina apologizes for using the spell so suddenly. She plans to explain everything later, but now she asks to bring the guy of their friends. Here, after they woke up, Carlet immediately apologized for their inappropriate behavior. The guy explained that they were actually looking for Takumi all this time. Carlet says that they heard that the guy was heading to Fatima and were waiting for his arrival. However, since the guys are not believers, their time in the Holy Capital is limited, and today was the deadline. Since they managed to meet at the last moment, they either lost their heads. Rain asks for one bag to start. Takumi opens it and sees a pile of coins. Rain explains that it is 1,000 gold coins, Takumi's well-deserved share. Carlet bows his head and asks the boy to accept his share without objection. Takumi understands that it is impossible for him to accept such a sum. Faralina calms Carlet and says that he is too excited and impatient. Here, Faralina turns to Rain and tells her not to try to hide her unpreparedness for the unexpected meeting under a gloomy expression. The girl wanted to object, but as it turned out, it was true. Then she apologized to Takumi and said that there was probably some truth in it. She said that she was going to thank the guy the next time they met, but then everything happened so suddenly, so her head started spinning. She thanked Takumi for saving her then, so he says that he should have thanked the guys. He asks them for forgiveness for not having sent them letters since then. Here, Carlet turns to Takumi. He tells her that this money was given to the guy in the Adventurers Guild in recognition of his achievement of destroying monsters, so it belongs to him. However, Takumi doesn't understand why the guild would pay him. The guys started explaining everything. Now Takumi understands everything. He thinks that it's all because he accidentally touched the map. Rain explains that because the results of the guy's achievement were added to the merits of the Blue Wolf's mane, their group's rank suddenly flew from E to the very last, SSS. However, Carlet is worried about the possibility of losing confidence in the ranking system itself due to the fact that they received the SS rank for the merits of a person who is not only not a member of the guild, but also an adventurer in principle. Faralina explains that this is why the guild offered to recruit the guy so that everything would return to normal. Carlet believes that Takumi probably had a hard time too, as rumor has it that the entire guild and high-ranking adventurers were involved in searching for him. However, the boy did not meet anyone. The team members are surprised. Takumi confirms and says that his journey went smoothly and very calmly. Carlet recalls conversations about how the guy managed to escape from the dense encirclement of the guild, and how he got out of a difficult situation by unleashing an information war. The guy says with a smile that nothing like that happened. It was a very eventful trip, during which he met many different people. The guy says that this is all somehow very different from what he heard. The girl confirms and says that looking at this face, it seems that all this is true and the trip really was not bad. Suddenly, Carlet says that he is asking for quite a lot because he wants Takumi to become a member of the Manned Blue Wolf Guild. The guy agrees with a smile, saying that there is no problem. Carlet is very surprised. He understands perfectly well that he has no right to ask, but he still asks the guy with interest if he really agrees. Takumi agrees with a smile. However, he is not an adventurer and does not really understand all these crude things. So, if the guys are satisfied with his formal presence on the lists, then he agrees. Carlet bows and says that this is more than enough. At this point, Rain thanks the guy. She snaps her finger and apologizes to the guy for getting straight to the point. However, Rain wants to know if Takumi will tell his secret about who he is. This question is very interesting to the guys, but no one is eager to ask it. Carlet tells the girl that she shouldn't ask questions so bluntly. However, the girl can't help herself because she's always been interested in finding out. Takumi doesn't know how much the boys want to hear, but they were incredibly surprised when they found out that the guy was the fourth hero. Takumi objects and says that he's neither a wise man nor a brave man, but a very simple man. He was simply drawn into this whole thing by a summons. Carlet was right that the guy was a hero. He wondered where the guy managed to defeat so many monsters, and it turned out to be during the demon army's attack on the capital. Now it all makes sense. Rain notices that Takumi is strong after all. However, Takumi is modest and denies it, as he is just somehow coping with the help of abilities. Faralina guesses that this is the same ability with which Takumi created one thing, which is really a little more than just convenient. Carlet explains that it is not close to the capital after all, and in this port city of Mizantos there is always a crush, He asks with interest whether the guys have much time to transfer to the ferry for him. The guy says he got there via Autorast, so maybe he made a pretty big detour. The elf was surprised that the boy swam across the strait and walked through a large forest. Takumi clarifies that the large forest is the forest where the Tree of Life is located. Faralina was surprised that the boy knew about the Tree of Life. Takumi says that the local elves told about it. The girl was completely surprised. After all, the entrance is strictly limited. It is impossible for a person to be let in. So I suppose that's true, but also the bow and how he managed to get through. And on the way back, it was a piece of cake to get lost, so they gave him one thing to make it easier to find his way. The guy takes out a branch from the Tree of Life. The elf was completely confused when she saw this artifact. The guy admits that the elders of Sepsan gave him this branch. Here, the elf Faralina fell. She suddenly apologized and explained that her head was spinning. Faralina explains that the Forest of Life is a holy place for the elves, where the descendant of the holy ancestor of the elves lives. The girl is in some shock that a common man managed to get there and even meet the queen from the legends herself. Rain guesses that Takumi takes more risks than adventurers. She asks with interest what the guy is going to do next. After all, if Takumi really wanted to become a member of the group, he would need to register as an adventurer at one of the guild's branches or at the main headquarters. The guy apologizes, but he still has some business to attend to here, so he can't register right now. And these things are a bit of a hassle. Rain reported that they would be able to help Takumi with his affairs, since they could be in this place until the end of today. Faralina agreed and asked to tell what happened first. Carlette agreed and confirmed that they were one team. Takumi sincerely thanks everyone. Takumi laid out the whole situation. Faralina says that there are rumors about the high priest within the guild as well. As it turns out, the high priest is of interest not only to the parishioners but also to other adventurers. Carlette asked Rain if she was ready. The girl giggled and took off her cape, revealing her new outfit. Takumi was surprised to see the maid's uniform. The girl explained that gathering information was the thief's area of expertise. She was going to ask the people in this uniform for the information she needed. The guys did all the work. Carlette and Takumi shook hands, so he thanked the guys for the information and said that he would definitely use it. In fact, Carlette sincerely regrets that he will no longer be able to help his friend in any way. Rian waves goodbye and says that they will see each other again and relent. They will wait for good news from the guy. The guy asks Carlette with interest if they really don't want to split the money they were given between themselves. The leader explains that the rewards the group receives are divided equally. Since Takumi is now a member of the group, he should now happily accept his share. The girl winks and says that groups break up mainly because of money, so to maintain peace, it's better for Takumi to accept them. The guys drove away in the cart. The guy waves his hand after them. Takumi is walking on his bed in the inn. Now, based on the information received, it turns out that in order to gather a certain number of poor people, they are even willing to pay those who bring them. Did they do this so that the Holy Virgin would once again be convinced how well she lives, thanks to the grace of God, or was it all to satisfy their vanity by giving alms? It seems that all this functions as a support system for the cult itself. At this point, Takumi notices the bag of gold coins. Now, an idea has come to his mind that can definitely solve the problem that is troubling him so much. The guy remembers that Nene had already mentioned that only parishioners are allowed to live in the sacred capital. And in order to bet on them, they need to pay a monetary contribution of 10 gold coins. The guild paid the boy 30 gold coins. Even if it didn't solve the problem, it might help move the needle. Suddenly, everyone was shocked. Takumi came to the post. The guy was unhappy that the servants were ready to accept the contribution, but not the voluntary entry of the colony residents. He does not understand how this can be. The believer is confused. He asks not to raise his voice. Takumi got really angry. He hit the table with his fist and broke it into 2 pieces. He refused to lower his voice and said that it was too unfair. As a result, the believer took him by the hand. The man said that to begin with, indeed, to become a parishioner, you need to pay a fee of 10 gold coins. However, the guy demands to do this for 100 people, which is just madness. As far as the priest understands, Takumi is an acquaintance of the Holy Virgin, which means it must be known that these poor people are being brought from all over the country. So he says that he knows that they are not being given any help and are kept within the city limits. The believer says that helping the poor is of course a good thing, but then the church will be in a difficult position. The believer himself asks the guy to think about it. After all, it is precisely because of the presence of the unfortunate poor that they have the opportunity to sympathize and put into practice the teachings of the sacred texts. In order to sympathize with others and give alms, one must first have these very needy neighbors. The believer understands that the guy is apparently not a poor person. He asks to curb his ardor. After all, if Takumi alone helps such a huge number of people, then other parishioners will not have the opportunity to give alms. Takumi was very angry. He realized that these people not only turned a blind eye to the suffering of the poor, but also shamelessly used them as a tool to satisfy the selfish desires of the parishioners. In this case, Takumi is going to increase the amount, and there will be no need to return the money for this. The believer does not believe what he heard. He said that the guy's generosity simply has no limits. The believer happily wrote down the amount in the book. He was going to donate the gold coins he had brought. Who would have thought that he would change his attitude to the situation so much if he simply added a few coins to the donation? At the end, the believer adds words about the boy being blessed by God. Takumi angrily asks to spare him such a blessing. The boy angrily walks down the street, shocking everyone with his mood. At this time, the boy thinks that the believers, being a novice guiding people, are only capable of speaking so coldly. Takumi was not so much angry as shocked. So he helps, which may be the norm for a believer, or even for the entire church. The question is how rotten the church structure is. The guy understands that it will take a lot of effort to fix all this. Meanwhile, the morning of the first priest begins with a prayer to the Lord. A considerable dialogue with the Lord was a sacred ritual that no one dared to disturb. After this ritual, the priest stands up and puts on his headdress. A subordinate approaches the high priest and says that they have a sermon in the cathedral today. The first priest asks how many people are coming. Vera generally says that they are expecting about 300 people. The high priest finds this remarkable. He thinks that the Lord will probably be pleased to see such a large crowd of ordinary people gathered. The believer continues to speak about the results of the investigation into the recent incident of the good news bell ringing. The high priest asks with interest what happened there and whether they managed to find out anything. The believer says that everything did not quite work out. The high priest's face immediately darkened. The believer says that, unfortunately, no traces of the divine coming were found. The cause was probably a gust of wind or some other natural phenomenon. Suddenly, the high priest waves his staff, and the believer gets it on his head. The high priest considers this a blasphemous statement. All the holy scriptures in the hotel that the bell erects this incident of the Lord. The first priest is sure that this is it. He does not think that it cannot be something else. After all, if the believers have not found evidence of this, it is only because of a lack of faith in the Almighty. The high priest thinks that they should be ashamed. The believer lies on the floor and holds his head. He asks for forgiveness and says that he has felt his mistakes and will immediately return to the search. The first priest exhales. He believes that if the believer has understood everything well, then he should proceed to his work. The believer continues to talk about the news. He reports that a request for the transfer of personnel has come from the village of Queralt. This request has already been made to them, and here it is heard again during the presentation of information. They ask for about 20 men for physical labor and about 10 young women of pleasant appearance. The first priest understands that the villagers have recently asked for workers, although they constantly receive large donations, so their request cannot be ignored either. The high priest gives the order to send them people from the heretic villages. The man is firmly convinced of his decision and definitely believes that he is doing the right thing. The high priest indicated, using the carcasses of a bandit group, as always. He orders the young to be taken alive, the rest to be destroyed. Let other villages see what fate awaits dissenters. The high priest thinks that the Lord will certainly be pleased if these disgusting pagans prove useful to the parishioners. The believer awkwardly agrees and provides the latest report on the Holy Virgin. The believer began his report. The Holy Virgin woke up at 7 in the morning, dressed for 31 minutes. Thus, the priest reported absolutely every minute of the Holy Virgin's life. Nothing was missed. He ended everything by saying that the Holy Virgin was with the parishioners until 12. In the end, the number of bathroom visits and bedtimes remained unchanged. The high priest realized that, judging by everything, the Holy Virgin had had an uneventful day yesterday as well. The high priest gave an order that nothing should happen to the Holy Virgin in the future. He told the priest to continue his observations and not to report all the details to him. The boy obeyed and left the high priest alone. The high priest says that the Holy Scriptures say that the Lord will descend to earth from another world, and also that a girl from another world will take on the role of the Holy Virgin. This simply cannot be a coincidence. The Lord left them a believing Holy Virgin. The highest bliss is to serve, like the Holy Virgin, the noblest of creations, because through her they can touch the will of God. The high priest wonders why the Lord has left the matter now. How many high priests have there been so far? Why now, when it is precisely the current man who is one? He wonders why it was the girl who was abandoned, and not the man. He understands that all of God's deeds have a meaning. He wonders what kind of will is behind it. The high priest turns to the Lord. He asks with interest whether he is testing him. He asks with interest what the Lord wants from him and asks to show the way to the one who is unable to see his will. The high priest falls to his knees and asks to be guided again, as he did before, no matter how much he went astray. The man bowed his head. Suddenly a light appeared before him. He was glad that a great divine revelation had come to him, and the will of the Lord had been revealed to him. He stretched his hands upward. He says that if it is his will, then he can humbly submit to it. He believes that he must take the Holy Virgin as his wife this very evening. Meanwhile, Takumi is sitting in his room. Since the events began, the whole serious situation has become clearer, but he still has no idea where all this is growing from. The guy realizes that this could really become a headache. Suddenly, he is distracted from his thoughts by a knock on the door. The guy looks at you in fear and wonders who it could be. The knocking gets louder and louder, and the guy quickly approaches the door. Then Nene runs into the room and says that she has a problem. The girl tells the guy's story. They sit opposite each other and are silent. Takumi thinks that this might actually be a great opportunity to break out of the deadlock. Nine is surprised. Takumi wonders if it won't be a burden for the girl. She thinks that she thought it would be great if the guy helped her with this. The girl puts her hands in front of her and smiles, asking the guy for a favor. Takumi thinks about it. Dark night. All the buildings are illuminated by bright lanterns. Nine is sitting in her room. The girl is writing something in a notebook. She is distracted by a creaking sound. It turns out that Takumi is sitting in her closet. He tells himself that he needs to be careful because he can't make a single sound. The guy remembers that the man should be here soon. He couldn't even imagine that he would have to wait in the closet. The guy remembers a conversation with a girl. As it turns out, the high priest has a conversation with the Holy Virgin. Nine agrees and says that the man is going to come to her room that night. Therefore, she intends to say everything she thinks. Takumi thinks that this is a really good opportunity to get out of the deadlock. Mene is glad that the guy understands her. That's why she thought it would be great if someone like that helped her with this. Takumi guesses that if he just stays in the room, the high priest will just turn around and walk away. She says that in this case, the girl will hide it somewhere, and at the very climax, that Takumi should jump out. Takumi agrees, since the high priest won't be able to escape in the middle of the conversation. Yes, this will be a support for the girl. Takumi realizes that he made a deal with Nene. Now he is here, hiding in the closet, holding his breath. He has feelings as if he is some kind of lover or stalker. Suddenly, there is a knock on the girl's door, and she opens the door. Then the high priest comes in. He greets the holy maiden and says that he's in the best of spirits today. Nene was surprised by the man's mood. The high priest bows his head and apologizes for visiting at such a late hour. Takumi notices that the high priest came alone, without an escort. The boy understands that this means that the matter for which the priest came forces him not to involve outsiders. In that case, maybe Takumi shouldn't witness this conversation either. Nene is asked if the high priest has any business with her. She puts on some tea and listens to the man. The high priest joyfully folded his hands in front of him and said that a divine revelation had come to him. He joyfully offers the Holy Virgin to have a child. Takumi and Nene were extremely surprised by these words. The girl apologized and asked what the man meant. The high priest explains that he continued to question the Lord. He wondered why he left them the Holy Virgin, why he left the girl and not the man. The high priest reports that today he heard his voice and his revelation came to him. As it turned out, this voice told him to have a child with the Holy Virgin and that this was why the girl was abandoned. It explains that marriages among clergy are regulated by church rules. Not to mention that extramarital relations are an act of adultery and are strictly prohibited. The high priest says that the sin of adultery described in the Holy Scriptures applies to their parishioners. The man says that nothing is written there about his first follower, the high priest, and his messenger, the Holy Virgin. In other words, this sin does not apply to them. Takumi realizes that this theory is very selfish. Nani explains that, however, she has no intention of doing so, and with all due respect to the high priest, she is forced to refuse. The high priest laughs. He considers this refusal absurd. He believes that this has already been decided by the Almighty himself. The priest gets up from the table. He believes that his meeting with the Holy Virgin is a miracle that brought them together. This is the inevitable providence of God. He believes that this is precisely why the girl was sent to earth by this Lord. Nini thinks this is complete nonsense. The high priest puts his hands to his ears and asks the girl if she can't hear the voice of God right now. He asks her to listen to the will. Nene screamed and said that she did not hear any voice and that the man was simply having an auditory hallucination. Here the high priest stretched out his hand to the girl. He says that it is high time to offer her body as a sacrifice and carry the Son of God. Nani resists, and then Takumi comes out of the closet. He asks to stop this scene immediately. The girl immediately rushed to the guy. The high priest was angry. He would not find out for what purpose he had crept into the Holy Virgin's room, but to stand in the way of the one who had received his revelation was tantamount to obstructing the will of God. The priest was furious. Takumi said that the man kept talking about the revelation of God's will, but in his opinion, the man was just justifying his own actions, hiding behind his name. Takumi gives the example of the people outside. He believes that the high priest oppresses them and uses them in the name of the Lord. Takumi does not understand where the man saw the will of the Almighty in everything. The first priest says that the will of the Lord extends beyond what he prepares for people. A man believes that all his actions are in accordance with the will of the Almighty. He thinks that he is the one who follows the teachings of the Holy Scripture, being its earthly representative. He believes that the will of the Lord is in him. The priest believes that there is no teaching that requires a deviation from the path of man. Takumi counters that it is the high priest who ultimately tramples on his teaching by talking about honoring the Lord. The man believes that Takumi was wrong to try to reason with and scold those who do not understand divine teachings with human words. At this point, the high priest put his hands to his ears again and realized what had happened. Nene and Takumi looked at him worriedly. The high priest said that right now, to him, his first follower, the Lord had informed him of the true nature of the one who had intended to hinder his will. Takumi, the man summoned from another world along with the heroes, was in fact a flatterer and messenger of the devil, deceiving the holy maiden. The boy did not expect to hear this at all. The first priest began to talk about Takumi's plan to prevent the birth of their child. This is the boy's evil plan, which consists of preventing the birth of a new life. Takumi completely lost track of the man's words and realized that this was madness. The high priest said that the guy leaves him no other choice. He uses sacred magic and asks the Lord to hear his wish and extinguish the evil. Nine noticed the attack in time and warned the boy to be on guard. However, as soon as the attack was prepared, an unusual magic ball appeared around Takumi. An unknown glow appeared around the Takumi. The guy touched this shell with his hand and received a small burn. He wonders what that was just now. He assumes because it is a wall of light under what seems to be only high voltage. Suddenly, the girl warns the guy that he will now be touched by the sacred magic of the high priest. Now, the boy realized that this was a restraining magic that looked like a magic cage. In this case, the guy is only going to break it. A sledgehammer appears in his hands, and he hits the magic with all his might. As it turned out, the sledgehammer, although it went right through, but as soon as the guy touched it with his hands, Nani began to pray. She asks for the light that eliminates the teaching. She uses dispersal. But as soon as the girl was about to use her magic, she disappeared. The magic does not work. The high priest says that it is useless. No matter how strong the Holy Virgin's magic is, it cannot dispel magic of the same nature. The girl asks the high priest to stop immediately. She says that it is impossible to use the correct elimination on a simple person. She believes that the man is deliberately breaking the commandments of the Lord. Takumi was surprised when he heard about the elimination. He thought that this barrier was just restricting movement. The high priest approaches the holy maiden and tells her not to be misled, because the guy is truly evil. The high priest throws his hands up. He casts the spell again. The high priest calls to turn into dust under the weight of the strongest sacred magic. Then a stream of magic appears around Takumi. The girl was excited and screamed the guy's name. Suddenly, the panel appeared in front of the guy again. The panel said that the action had to be confirmed. This action was against religious belief. The choice of consent and refusal appeared on the board again. Takumi got angry again because the panel appeared at the wrong moment again. However, the guy understands that this panel is different from the previous ones. He notices the alarm sound and the wording of the question. The guy doesn't have time to think about the answer to the question now. He's going to click agree as usual. However, he remembers the girl's words that she would always press no out of fear. He understands that perhaps Nene is right. His finger is about to press no, but immediately freezes on the choice. Takumi can't decide for a long time. He understands that until now, he didn't care about all this. But for some reason this time it seems like it's something very important. The high priest uses sacred magic again. Nene almost lost her voice, worried about the boy. She hoped that this nightmare would end soon, because it was even more terrible than horror. Takumi made his decision, chose the answer on the panel. Suddenly, the sacred magic seemed to evaporate around him. The high priest could not find words to express his surprise. The Holy Virgin threw herself on the boy's shoulders, because she is glad that he is okay. She says with tears of joy in her eyes that the high priest's magic simply disappeared. She wonders what the boy did. Takumi explains that the sign with the choice of yes and no simply appeared in front of him again. The guy explains that this time it said something about actions that contradict the faith and canceling these actions. The girl asks with surprise and interest what the guy did next. Takumi himself does not really remember, but it seems that he pressed it, as usual, and then the magic just disappeared. The girl, having heard about actions contrary to faith and the cancellation of actions, seems to understand something. At this time, the high priest does not understand how this is possible and why his magic did not work. However, the high priest believes that something else is more important now. The priest understands that a few moments ago he clearly heard the voice of the Lord. However, he understands that now their oath is broken. The man's face is filled with incredible horror. He understands that this simply cannot be. He calls upon the holy radiance, which does not react to the man's words at all. He can't summon magic. The priest starts screaming. After all, he had given his love to the Lord for so many years, sacrificed so much for him. He wondered how he could turn away from him. The man begins to scream hysterically, liquid pouring from his mouth, eyes, and nose. He tirelessly repeats the name of the Lord and asks him to answer questions. The man fell to the floor. His hands were shaking. The guy asks with interest what is happening to the man. The Holy Virgin explains that the Lord broke the oath with the high priest. Nene explains that the holy light is the first magic that the priests learn after the oath ritual that the boy saw earlier. What the man lost means that he can no longer use holy magic. However, this is not the only one. This has never happened before. Since the Lord has completely rejected him, he will not be a high priest, nor will he even be made a low-ranking priest. Now, the man will be lower in status than the most simple believer. Takumi wonders how such a devout man, who dedicated himself entirely to serving the Lord and served until he became the first priest, could have made a mistake somewhere. Takumi realized that it seemed that due to his excessive piety, he had begun to confuse the soul's desire from the heart with the voice of the Lord, although it was hard to say for sure. Nini bowed her head. After what happened, the senior, no better than the college of the high priest, was removed from office. Now, a representative of the opposition faction can take his place. In addition to the removal of the high priest, other morals and injustices of the church came to light. The whole commotion sometimes died down, sometimes flared up again. At one point, even the continued existence of the church itself was in question. It seems that it was Nani, being a saint, who maintained some order both in the church and among the believers. The cathedral said, and then he, that the Lord High Priest chose the wrong path. At the meeting, they said that the Lord's teaching is great, but they should not use his name to prove their righteousness, and they follow the Lord's path like an old woman of sinners. Nani, who led the meeting, spoke about how the Lord's commandments are meant to teach us how to live correctly. This is the revelation that Nani received from the Lord. The guy praised the girl and said that her sermon was simply amazing. The girl asked her not to praise her and said that she took some of the lines from him. She asks the guy with interest what he is going to do next. The girl turned away and said that if the guy didn't mind, she would really like him to stay here and help her sometimes. Even if the guy was just nearby, that would be enough for her. The girl says that now the church needs to be reformed, so she will be very busy. So she thought that she would feel calmer if she had a familiar person nearby. However, Takumi apologizes and says that he is very happy about Nine's offer, but he is already bound by a promise. He needs to be in a city called Laurent. Nine is sad for a moment. She says that she is very sorry. She understands that Takumi is leaving her. She asks with interest if the guy will come again. Takumi says that he will come as soon as everything calms down. He promises to let the girl know about it in advance. She asks not to do this because there are no phones here, and by the time the letter arrives, the guy will have already arrived himself. Besides, something tells her that she will immediately find out about Takumi's arrival. The girl waves goodbye to the boy. Thus, his first journey in the new world came to an end. Initially, Takumi wanted to thank the girl, but the short duration of the trip did not affect its meaningfulness. The guy has been to so many places and met so many different people. All these meetings have opened up so many new things to him, and now he's heading back to Laurent I. He's curious about how the others are doing. The guy definitely wants to see them again.